say for sure what's going to happen in the future. But if you're looking for data in the present, we're not seeing it yet.
I think there's going to be a strong human alpha. You know, like when vending machines came along, it's not like bartenders went away. I like going to a bar, talking to the bartender, and they make a great drink. And those bartenders make better money today than they did 20 years ago. I don't, and maybe the vending machine replacement model isn't the right one in that case, but I think that there's a lot of value in human interaction that's going to get a premium in the future. Because as more stuff gets automated, I want to have an actual driver when I go to Las Vegas. I don't want to go in a Waymo. I want to have a great driver in a nice car that takes me to the dinners, drives me around. New York City, same thing. I don't want to go in a Waymo per se. I want to have, you know, people that can do things that could otherwise be automated, and I'll pay a huge premium. I could sit in a friggin' massage chair. Why do I go pay someone $200 for an hour massage? You know, I think there's an aspect to the alpha of you. We could cut that one, but I do think there's a premium to humans, and I don't think that. And I actually think the premium
to humans.
No, the counter narrative. This is what J-Cal. This is really important. I think that the counter narrative to automation generally is that we're going to realize the importance of human interaction and humans in the loop, and we're going to pay a premium for it.
Well, do you remember like a
That's
year
why
ago?
I don't believe in AGI and the singularity happening next year. I'm just not there.
Do you remember like a year ago when Klarna said they're going to replace their whole customer service department with AI? And they did a lot of hype. It was peak RF farming. And lo and behold, they flipped the decision back after a year. They said that from a brand perspective, a company perspective, it's just so critical that you are clear to your customer that there will always be a human if you want it.
Human in the loop will be the premium, and we will all realize in the next year and a half the importance of human in the loop, even in the context of AI and automation working. Human in the loop is going to be more valuable, and then you're going to pay a premium for human in the loop.
There's so many CEOs who want to tap into the media's hype cycle. This is the thing, is that whenever the media gets a hold of one of these narratives, there's so many CEOs who are not like Farb, right? Who just are not original, and they don't really have anything important to say. So the only way for them to get publicity is to glom onto that press cycle and try to use it. And then they'll chime in with, you know, how they're going to do crazy things like eliminate the whole customer support department. And then lo and behold, it turns out just to be totally fake.
I think the ramp data is directionally accurate. In our experience, I would say the same thing. I think people that use AI tend to grow faster, they tend to hire more, they tend to make more.
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, by the way, I actually agree with Jake.
100% agreed on that.
From a career standpoint, I would not want to be a level 1 customer support rep, because I do think that, like, if all you're doing is like answering forgotten password requests, that's not a great place to be. However, those jobs were basically outsourced to the Philippines and places like that a long time ago. I mean, most enterprises are not doing kind of that level 0, level 1 customer support in the US. They do have customer support centers, but they're doing like level 2, level 3. They're doing the escalations, the higher value stuff. That's going to be a lot harder to replace with AI.
Totally.
I do kind of worry about, well, what happens in some of these other countries that are doing the super entry level stuff, because I think that is
so they'll have massive job loss.
But well, I don't know if it'll be massive, but that's where the risk is. I mean, yeah, frankly, it's not in the US.
This is, so that maybe we're getting to some consensus here. Job displacement versus job loss. Here is Brett Adcock sharing what they're doing at Figure. They had an 8-hour challenge to have this robot they're building sort packages, and they did it for 200 hours. That's today. This is the least good it will ever be. This is the worst it's going to ever be. These things are getting really good. I spent time with Elon. I've looked at Optimus. I can tell you Optimus is better than what Figure's doing. What Optimus is going to do when Bezos and Andy Jassy unleash Optimus inside of the Amazon factories is it's going to get rid of let me state this very clearly, every single package sorting, every single package delivery will not be done by humans in 10 years. And it's starting today. Just like the idea that you would put together some of this consumer electronic stuff in factories with humans has gone away over time. And other countries, I think you're making a very good point here, Zach, are going to experience it first. In America, knowledge workers, the entrepreneurial spirit, I think we're going to see a Cambrian explosion in startups, which means we're going to be the ones who benefit from it. But if you're looking at those other countries, they'll see it acutely first. We're just going to see it here with drivers, and that's 5-10 million people, like we saw it with cashiers. The idea of going to a cashier at a fast food restaurant, which I know you guys don't go to all that often, to our Starbucks, the idea that you would interact with the cashier has been going away slowly because it's just consumers don't even want it. We'll agree to disagree here to a certain extent. Maybe we made
Look,
some
I went to
progress.
McDonald's. I went to McDonald's recently, and I ordered from one of those monitors. Zero
What did you order?
robots
You
involved.
filet a fish guy? I'm not filet a fish guy. What did you get? What's your
I got a Big Mac. I like the Big Mac.
You like a Big Mac. What about you, Sax? What's your order? Did you get a McFlurry?
They
Did
had
you
a
get an apple
thing,
pie?
called Homegrown Burger, which was some new. I think it was kind of like more like an now type burger.
A Shake Shack?
Testing.
Smash patty?
Yeah, it was good.
Any good?
Anyway, my point is just the automation. Obviously, they didn't have a cashier there already, but there's zero robots involved. Similarly, there's already a lot of automation going on in those Amazon warehouses. I don't know if you've ever been to like a FedEx packaging or routing depot. It's all conveyor belts and
Yeah, robots pushing it and
Yeah,
directing.
but it's not humanoid robots. There's already tons and tons of automation in
Sure.
those places.
But this last mile part is the one I think that is going to shock people. When you have an Optimus walking the Tesla self-driving car, and then they walk into your porch, ring your doorbell, and knock on your door, put it on your front step porch. That's where this is going to get super interesting.
I think it's going to lead to a boom because think about like just something like building a house. Okay.
Oh,
You know how long it takes to build a house? It takes
in California,
years.
3 years.
Yeah, it's
Texas,
like
9
multiple
months.
years.
In
Now,
China, one day.
There you go.
but imagine if you have like a construction crew, and I don't know, it's like 20 humans and 50 robots or something. The humans have to tell the robots what to do. I don't
Yeah,
think
the
it's gonna take-
supervisors.
I think it's going to take a long time for the robots to be able to do that super high speed work, but they can be given tasks, and then
Carry the
gradually
lumber.
they can do. So
Yeah.
maybe it only takes a year to build a house instead of 2 or 3, and that's the solution to our housing crisis.
100%. All right, listen. In a related story, by Commandant Howard Lutnick's decree, subject Dario Amodei will be permitted to bring his powerful new model, Fable 5, to market for the glory of the realm and at the pleasure of His Majesty Lord Trump. Remember 2 weeks ago, the U.S. government put export restrictions on Fable and Mythos and the Iliad and the Odyssey and whatever else they're doing over there at Anthropic. And Anthropic expanded Mythos to 50 unauthorized entities, according to sources. That included SK Telecom, which allegedly, perhaps, maybe has a lot of ties to China. On June 30th, Howard, Commerce Department, that's my guy, Howard Lutnick, my favorite in the administration, with respect to USX. He lifted controls on Fable 5. Mythos 5 was restored to U.S. customers this past week, June 26th. Many suspected this would happen because Anthropic replaced Dario as their lead negotiator. Here's the palace intrigue I was referencing earlier. Co-founder Tom Brown, whoever that is, took the spot and appears to be getting along better with the Trump organization. For example, he proactively genuflected, showed the tweet to Lutnick's tweet narrating the export restrictions had been lifted. Tom Brown, thanks for your partnership on this, Secretary. Exclamation point. Look at that smile. Tom Brown coming in to save the day. In a post-mortem blog post, Anthropic said the jailbreak that triggered the shutdown was not unique to Claude. Remember, Andy Jassy reported to the Commerce Department what was going on with this. Okay, Sachs, former AI czar, what's going on? Give us the palace intrigue, please.
Well, look, the export control letter was taken down after 2 weeks. I think that this was a highly unusual circumstance, and it was brought about by 3 things, 3 conditions, and you really needed all 3 in order for this to happen. Number 1, you had Dario running around for months saying that he had created a cyber weapon. He almost boasted about it. It was Mythos, okay? So that was number 1. Number 2 is you have a trusted partner of Anthropic, which is Amazon, which did its testing Fable, which was Mythos with guardrails, and they reported that the guardrails failed. So therefore, Fable was, according to Dario, the cyber weapon. So that was important fact number 2. And then fact number 3 is that when confronted with this information, Dario basically refused to roll back Fable until the jailbreak could be fixed, or at least that's what he communicated to the administration, and that's what the administration heard. So I think if you change any one of those 3 facts, this would have ended up not causing the government to basically send that letter to Anthropic. I think if Dario hadn't primed officials to see Mythos as a cyber weapon, wouldn't have happened. If their trusted partner Amazon hadn't reported the jailbreak, wouldn't have happened. And if Dario hadn't refused to take action when he did, then this wouldn't have happened. I think this was serving mitigating circumstance. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people are reading a lot into this letter. I know that foreign companies or foreign actors and allies and partners of the U.S. are wondering, does this mean that our ability to access U.S. technology is going to be limited? I don't think it does. I think that the administration reacted with the tools at its disposal. And I think that what the president cares about is what he's always said, which is he wants to be pro-innovation, he wants to be pro-export, he wants to be pro-infrastructure, he wants to support American companies in the AI race. And I don't think people should over-extrapolate based on what just happened over the past few weeks. I think
Let
it
me
was
ask you,
highly particular to this fact pattern.
a lot of discussion of exports. Let's talk about imports for a reason. It seems to me that importing Chinese models, when we in fact have open source models here from NVIDIA and other players, why have you not, or during your time, did you not advise or talk about here blocking access to import? We will not allow the importation of Huawei products into the United States or self-driving technology from China. Why are we allowing open source models? Why don't we put an edict? And why didn't you suggest that when you were the czar of AI? Why didn't we stop Kimi and DeepSeek from coming into this country in order to drive our open source technology and to keep the leakage from those model stacks?
Well, if you
And is
think
that a
it's
concern of yours?
Well, number one is that once a model is open source, it stops being Chinese in a way, right? Because you can now take that model, fork it, create your own version, you run it in an American data center on your own hardware. There's no packets going back to China. There's no data leakage going back to China. In some sense, they've made a contribution to the open source community, and then people can take it from there. Now, should you still exercise caution? Absolutely, because you have to make sure that the model is safe and it doesn't contain backdoors. I mean, this is a relatively new surface area for cybersecurity, so look, we should obviously be cautious. But the bottom line is that when an American company takes an open source model and converts it and runs it itself, it is now theirs.
But it builds consensus around that model and makes that model stronger by more people participating in it, which was your argument for allowing people to get on the hardware stack.
Well, but then I think that leads me to argument number two, which is if you were to do something like ban open source in the United States, you'll put the United States on an island. The rest of the world is not going to follow suit. The rest of the world wants to use open models because of the advantages they offer. They're cheaper, they're more customizable, they offer more control, and again, they stop being Chinese models once you can take them and adapt them and run them on your own hardware. So the rest of the world's not going to stop using these models just because we do. And what we will do then is subject American enterprises to a token tax. You're going to end up paying for closed models in the U.S.
But there's NVIDIA. We have open source models now. NVIDIA has theirs, for example. There are other ones. So if there are open source models here that are equally competitive, would you then support an import control so that more people in America put their effort into American open source models?
Well, one of the things I've been saying
and Google's open source models, obviously.
One of the things I've been saying for over a year is that we need more strong offerings in open source from the United States. So I hope we win the open category of models, just like I do the closed. I mean, I hope America wins the AI race in both open and closed models. I don't really want anyone being forced to use models they don't want. But look, if American models, open models, are better than Chinese open models, they will win, and people will want to adopt them. So if what you're saying is true, that our open models are better, getting better, and surpass the Chinese ones, leave that to the market to decide. And just one last point on this is, I'm not against limiting the import of certain Chinese products in the U.S. For example, I don't think we allow Chinese connected cars.
We don't.
I think we should think twice about whether we allow, Chinese robots into the U.S. And
we block drones.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to have like a fifth column of, backdoor Chinese robots or something in the U.S. potentially. I'm just brainstorming here, okay? So I'm not against limiting certain things, but we should understand that when we do that, we are inviting retaliation by them as well. And we are in a trade relationship with them. We still need things from them. We still need rare earths, things like that. One day we won't. Hopefully, I do think we should try to be as independent and autonomous as possible. But while we do, we have to think very carefully about the larger trade relationship.
And Trump banned the import of Chinese drones, signature part of the legislation. All right. So a little housekeeping here. All In Summit is coming back September 13th, 14th, and 15th. 5th year of the summit. Keep raising the bar. Man, if you knew the speakers that I knew, that Freeburg's lined up, your brain would explode. This year, the nights are as good as the days because, let's face it, Freeburg likes to party. He's been known to have a cocktail or two. We're doing the biggest poker tournament we've ever done at the summit this year. Gaming will happen at the welcome party. And we're going to have a full casino night at an exclusive mansion in LA. Ooh la la. Applications open now. Allin.com. Don't miss our biggest event of the year. I think we have 12 trillion in market cap booked so far. Probably going to double. Okay, next topic number 3. It's a hot SCOTUS summer. The justices released 11 decisions in the final few days of the term. Let's discuss the top 3 right now. Birthright, citizenship. The case was Trump versus Barbara. On the first day of his second term, Trump, as you know, signed an EO ending automatic citizenship for children born to illegal immigrants or those on temporary visas. This is codified, I guess, in the 14th Amendment. The court struck it down 6-3, maybe 5-4. There's some nuance here. 255,000 children are born every year to non-citizen parents. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority, joined by all 3 liberal members. The court is still a bit polarized. Citizenship, then and now, was the right to have rights. We keep that promise today, according to Chief Justice's majority. Kavanaugh carved out a lane for Congress to tighten up on birthright citizenship. That's still consistent with the 14th Amendment. As you know, the administration has been pointing out, and watch Fox News, you've heard this a million times. If you watch CNN, not all in, you're going to maybe have heard of this once or twice. Birth tourism. A Chinese national, Dong Wan Li, was like guilty in 2019 to a scheme to help pregnant Chinese women enter the U.S. under false pretenses so their babies would be granted U.S. citizenship. She pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit immigration fraud and 1 count of visa fraud. So we handled that through the legal system. She served 10 months in prison. Trump's response to the loss, quote, Congress should start today to work on ending birthright citizenship. They will have my complete and total support for Trump. Feels like a loss for Trump objectively, but he's going to keep fighting this one. Close decision. If you ask Stephen Miller, he doesn't like immigrants like you 3 dudes, but I would let all 3 of you in again.
That's not his position.
Okay, well, you can explain. And I know he doesn't like
we're
immigrants.
Legal immigrants. We're legal immigrants.
Yes. Well, but
You understand the difference, right?
well, birthright would also be legal according to the Constitution.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, is it doesn't really make sense that, let's say, an illegal immigrant runs across the border, is like 9 months pregnant, pops out a baby, and all of a sudden they're an American citizen. How does that make sense?
What about somebody who's been here for 20 years, Sachs, worked really hard, they're illegal, and they have a baby? Should the baby be kicked out and the baby not be a citizen? Or let's say it's somebody's nanny, somebody's gardener. We have 20 million, 30 million illegal immigrants we've let into this country. We waved them in across many different Republican and Democratic terms over the last 30 years. What do you say to that person who has a baby? Should they be deported? Should they be given citizenship?
Well, look, the question here is what the Constitution says. And my view is that the original purpose and understanding of the 14th Amendment was to make sure that the children of freed slaves would have citizenship rights. That was the purpose of it. That was obvious. And I don't think it speaks to the situations you're talking about. And Congress should just make the law about those situations. But now Congress cannot make the law because the Supreme Court has ruled that citizenship is determined by birthright. So in that case,
Well, but my question was, somebody who's been here 20 years as an illegal immigrant,
yeah, I
who's
think
waved in
Congress should
under
decide
range.
that. I'm saying Congress should
What do you
decide
think?
that.
I'm asking you your personal opinion. Should they
I don't
get
know. I mean,
citizenship?
look, you're talking about an edge case. It's complicated, but the point is that we all know why the 14th Amendment was ratified. It was to protect freed slaves, obviously. And now we're in territory that's like very different, but the Supreme Court has decided that if you're born here for any reason whatsoever, even if you're an illegal, even if you weren't supposed to be in the country, now your children are American citizens. By the way, I don't think any country in the world has this policy. It's kind of a crazy policy. So I agree with Steve Miller.
I'm not sure it's an edge case. I think the majority case is people who've been here illegally for decades. And I think the edge case, the one you proposed, is the edge case, like a pregnant woman running across the border.
And let Congress decide that. I don't think the Constitution ever spoke.
What's your personal opinion, Mr. Chamath? Should the person who's been here for 10, 20 years, paid their taxes, but they're illegal, and they have a child, should that child be a citizen or not? Mr. Chamath's personal opinion.
I haven't thought about this.
Great. Okay, so I mean that's the key to the I think what we're talking about here.
No,
Freebird, do you have
no. Because Jacob, there's a big difference between making something constitutional and then doing it via a law of Congress. And what this report has said here is that Congress does not get to make the decision. The majority of the American people don't get to make the decision. The Constitution requires a certain point of view, and there's no way to change that without a constitutional amendment, which will never happen. So we're kind of now stuck with this position.
Well, if you read the language, and someone posted this was the debate that when the 14th Amendment was being debated, Senator Jacob Howard, I'll give credit to Geiger Capital for pointing this out. There's a transcript of the debate that took place. It says, every person born within the limits of the United States, subject to their jurisdiction, is by virtue of natural law, national law, a citizen of the United States. This will not, of course, include persons born in the United States or foreigners, aliens who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers accredited to the government of the United States, but will include every other class of persons. Because if you go to the history, in 1868, there was this Dred Scott decision, which denied citizenship to the children of slaves. And the intention at the time was to ensure citizenship for newly freed slaves and their descendants. That was the original intention of the 14th Amendment at the time. So this goes back to the great debate that happens at the Supreme Court all the time, which is the textual or the intentional reading of the Constitution or its amendments. The textual reading is you look strictly at the words, the plain, literal meaning of those words, and then the intentional reading is what was intended at the time by the framers of the Constitution or the amendment that may be the subject of the debate. And so I think that's ultimately what this comes down to. If you think about the intention at the time, it was really built around free slaves. There wasn't a consideration at that time of having this massive movement of immigration that was taking place, or that has taken place since. That wasn't even in the kind of realm of consciousness or consideration when this amendment was being passed. So the intentionalism kind of argument would be, hey, wait a second, this wasn't really what they intended, but the textual representation is what it is, and that's what the ruling kind of led to in this particular case. My personal opinion, if you're asking it,
I
do think birthright citizenship should be endowed to the children of legal residents of the United States, whether they're a citizen or not. So yeah, I think that's critical. So if you're a visitor, if you get on an airplane and fly here for a weekend on a vacation, and you have a visa or you have, temporary visitor status to come
or you're an ambassador.
Yeah, or you have a temporary visitor status to come to the United States to visit, you are not a resident of the United States. So your children should not become citizens of the United States unless you're a resident. And remember, we don't just have citizens and non-citizens. We also have resident status in this country. And a resident status is a green card. I mean, for years, I was on a green card. 3 of us were immigrants. We all went through this process. Once you get resident status, you're now a permanent resident of the United States. You haven't been given citizenship rights yet. But if you have a child, I think it's reasonable for your child to have citizenship rights if you're a legal resident rather than a legal visitor or illegal visitor to the United States. So that would be my personal assessment. It would be great for that to be the law, but obviously this is now kind of,
I think you explained that really well. I didn't even know all of this. I'm on your side. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. In addition, people shouldn't be able to do the tourism thing. We should handle that. I do think we should have an exception here for people who have been non-criminals, who are here illegally, because we, as America, Republicans especially, during the time when they were pro-free trade, NAFTA, and really waved in a large percentage of the immigrants who are here. Obviously, Biden did that as well. I think we have a moral obligation to those people since we waved them in, and we waved them in to work in our businesses because we wanted to pay under minimum wage to them. Those people suffered here in our country. To take those jobs, to make us richer, to make our country richer, we have a moral and ethical obligation to them and to their children. We should give them a path to citizenship unless they're criminals, and their children should be Americans since they came here to live the American dream. Whether it was illegal or not, we waved them in. That was our mistake. And now that we've closed the border, we should make amends to those 20 million people. That's my personal opinion.
Right,
I don't think we have
what you're doing right
more
now.
time to think about it. And Sachs, what's your look?
Well, my point is we're all just making arguments about what the law should be, and these are the kinds of arguments that Congress should be making and deliberating over.
Yeah.
And these are the edge cases. These are the nuances that should be handled in a citizenship law. And what the Supreme Court has done here is remove that space for Congress to legislate. And I think Congress needs that space because there are these edge cases, and instead it's interpreted the 14th Amendment in a way that I don't think is consistent with why it was ratified in the first place. And Freeberg is totally right about Dred Scott, which was one of the most awful, probably the most awful Supreme Court ruling of all time. It came out in 1857, and it ruled that black people, whether enslaved or free, were not U.S. citizens, and therefore they had no right to sue in federal courts. And the Chief Justice, Roger Taney, wrote the decision. He was extremely racist. He wrote that black people had, quote, no rights which the white man was bound to respect. And that decision furthermore ruled that Congress could not ban slavery in the new Western territories, which meant that it struck down the Missouri Compromise, which was the law that had kept the peace between the free and slave states for decades. And that is one of the direct things that then triggered the Civil War 3 years later. So it was this historically bad decision that I guess then the 14th Amendment tried to correct by saying that no, free slaves and their children would be
Totally different context than someone visiting from China for the weekend and having a baby.
Yeah, which we obviously, that one is an easy one to adjudicate. Chamath, I'm curious, it feels like as a society, we have now, because of the closure of the border, give Trump a lot of credit for that. It was easily done, which means it could have been done at any time by Biden, and that created a big rift in our society that we're still working through. The other rift that was created over the past year, we had many debates here about ICE and what some people, including myself, believe was a brutal way to deport people and a cruel way to deport people. Some people might disagree with my opinion, but it seems like Trump stood down on that and calmed it down. I think because it was so unpopular, this is according to the metrics that we saw from Pew and other studies. What do you think the path forward is now? The ICE aggressiveness has stopped. The border has been shut. We seem to be in a sort of holding pattern here, which I think was very wise by Trump to do that. Calm the situation down. I would have liked to see him calm it down a little earlier. What do you think the goal for it should be? We go look at 27, 28, 29. Do you think, obviously we all want legal immigration, but what do you think we should be aspiring to do as a country now that the issue has seemingly is not boiling over? What are your thoughts, Jim? Have you given it any thought?
I think that Western countries are losing their cultural representation that makes them unique. And I think that that's very bad. When my parents went to Canada and then stayed, I think part of what they were doing, whether they knew it or not, was making an explicit decision to be Canadian first, which who happened to be of Sri Lankan origin. When I came to the United States, I was making an explicit decision to become an American. And then my Canadian and then my Sri Lankan ancestry was second and third respectively. I think if you cede your immigration, you're ceding your culture. And I think that people have a responsibility to keep the values of what made that country unique in the first place. And you don't need to look too far, because you can look across the pond and you can look at the UK, and you can look at Germany, and you can look at France, and you have to ask yourself, is the cultural deviation from where they were, has it been better or worse for those countries? And I think in general, it has been worse. So I think people should want to come here to be a part of the American ideal, the American culture. And so I think we have to have a rational immigration policy that has compassion, but ultimately favors this idea that you can't come here to build your own version of your previous country here.
So assimilation is part and parcel of a functioning immigration system. I strongly agree. Freeberg, how should we go forward as Americans? We know Europe has had an issue with, or the populaces there, I think, are in agreement that they may have gone too far in terms of unmitigated massive amounts of immigration, specifically amongst groups that maybe are explicitly not wanting to assimilate. What's your thoughts on what America should do going forward? Do you believe we should be?
It's a great question. I think there's an easy answer. Going back to my makers versus takers point, if the primary motivation for an individual to come to this country is to be given benefits, to be given payments, to be given social services, to be given support, I think that that person should be denied immigration. If the primary motivation for the individual to come to the United States is to work to progress themselves, to become a maker, to create things, to work in such a way that they can generate income, save capital, buy things, advance their family's position, because they are denied those rights due to the tyranny of the place that they're coming from, then they should be granted immigration status to come to this country and contribute. Because at the end of the day, what people may not like to hear, which is the truth, is that every single one of those people is actually net positive in growing our economy. And everyone thinks it's a zero-sum game with respect to jobs in the United States, and we shouldn't let people into this country that create jobs. The fundamental truth is that anyone that is productive, meaning they create more value than they take in, grows the economy and more jobs get created, and overall we all benefit from having those individuals here in this country.
Well, I would
So
say
I'm all about discerning immigration, not on the lines of some cultural definition, but really around that simple framing of, are you going to get social support services or are you going to work? And if you're going to work,
a trade or a game? Very
and
simple.
by the way,
elegantly
if you are going to work, you are going to culturally assimilate, because that is what the United States is based on.
Yeah.
Which is productivity, work hard, create things that have individual agency, have the ability to progress yourself in this world, in this society. And if you take advantage of that opportunity, you're going to love the American ideals that this country was founded upon.
And there are ways to do that, Freeberg. You can look at people's desire to learn the language and understand the political system and culture here. If you said at the border, speaking fluent English, understanding our systems here, and doing some learning before you come here, that will give you more points in a point-based system. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, most of the great functioning democracies in the world have point-based systems. And part of that point-based system could be you're provisional here, and you get a visa for a certain amount of time, provided you don't commit crimes, you don't tap the welfare system and entitlement system, and you do create jobs. We'll take an unlimited number of Elon Musk, David Freebergs, David Saxes, and Jamal Palihapitias in my America as the 7th, 8th generation American. And speaking for the people who've been here the longest, we'll take an unlimited number of the besties I just mentioned, and we should recruit them actively. We should be trying to increase the population of the United States with those people. Every single person, Sax, we take that's a high performer like yourself from another country like South Africa, Sri Lanka, or pick the country. Every time we recruit one of those people, that gives us a gain. It also, in the super hyper competitive world, is a loss for China, for Iran, for wherever we can recruit the best and brightest who want to assimilate. Sax, I'll let you have the final input here. When you are J.D. Vance's chief of staff in the 3 years, what will your advice to J.D. be, and how will you frame this during the election cycle? How will you win my vote as a moderate? Chief of Staff David Sachs.
No, that's not going to happen. But
it's 100% going to happen. I talked to Jim.
Well, I can give you the actual polling data. So, first of all, I think it's broadly popular in America to seal the border and not allow illegal immigration. You're even on board with that, obviously. Now, the only people who really aren't are these DSA types who want open borders, they want to abolish ICE, they want mass amnesty. They are lunatics. Now,
communist lunatics.
If you look at deportations, about a third of U.S. adults say all immigrants in the U.S. who are here illegally should be deported, and then half say some shouldn't. So 32% are in favor of deporting all illegals, and 51% are in favor of deporting some. And almost everybody in that group says that anyone who's committed a violent crime should be deported. And then 16%, which is the DSA group, says none should be deported. So deportations are popular, provided that the illegals have committed violent crimes, have done other things that people think should be unacceptable. But you're right, only 32% believe that every single one should be deported. That's from Pew. Now, I guess I agree with Freeberg's point about the incentives. I mean, if you're coming here to get on welfare programs, forget about it. I mean, we should only allow people in if they're here to work and be successful and are not a net, would you say, a gain, not a drain? I agree with that. And even in the days of Ellis Island,
you can have it,
where the U.S. was very accepting of immigrants, 1/3 of immigrants who arrived at Ellis Island actually returned home. 2% were not allowed entry due to health or criminal problems, but a third actually went back. And that was because there was no social welfare. And if you didn't make it in the United States, you would leave. And now anyone can walk across the border. They download an app and they get $5,000 a month in welfare. And during the Biden administration, they were getting luxury hotel rooms, buses and flights all over the country. It was insane. So, I mean, we got to stop it. If you do get in, there should be some sort of moratorium on any kind of social program for maybe while you have a visa.
Did I just come up with that? I mean, it seems like the simplest thing you could ever do is just say you cannot tax the welfare system, you cannot tax Social Security benefits, which I don't think you can right now. You just can't tax anything. You can't take anything from the system for the 5 years you're here. Period, full stop. The end. And if that's okay with you, then come. And if you produce jobs and you create X amount of economic activity, let's say you create $10 million worth of economic activity. When you hit $10 million in economic activity, you are pushed to the front of the line and we review your case on a one-off basis. If you hit 5 million, you go next. And that would be actually like, let's put some goalposts there. Let's set some targets. Hey, you come to the country, you're an Iranian, Persian, amazing entrepreneur, you're a developer, you're an AI developer from Ukraine, you want to come here with your team? Great. What amount of money can you raise on your way in the door? You've got $6 million in venture funding? Great. You go to the front of the line. Let's go. Let's take these great entrepreneurs and creators and builders. Let's sweep the table with them. Now that we've calmed down this rhetoric around immigration and shut the border, which was a key piece of doing that. All right, let's keep
I don't
moving
think the
here.
DSA is pumped down. They still want to go back.
They're lunatics, these fucking communists.
They're
Honestly.
going to the Democrat Party.
I mean,
Let's talk about California, shall we, Jacob?
I mean, yes. Hold on a second. I mean, if they take over the Democratic Party, then I guess I'm Republican.
Colorado, a 15-term congresswoman, 30 years. This lost to a DSA. So it's not just New York. It's not just because of Zora and Mavnani. The DSA is very popular now
Socialism is going to win
in
anyway.
any blue city.
This is a quick way to, to Ro Khanna and Rahm Emanuel and to, Ro Khanna's a law school, but to Rahm Emanuel, to Shapiro, to
I
anybody
don't
who
think
have a
Ro Khanna,
brain
why
in
do
the
you say Ro
Democratic
Khanna
Party.
is a lost cause? I've been telling you for a long time that you may disagree with what Ro Khanna is doing and saying, but it's popular in the Democratic Party. I think he's got his finger on the pulse.
Well, he wants
I'm
to
not
win,
going
I
back,
get
but-
it, but I think you have to, the quick win, the quick hit, the quick bump of the fentanyl or methamphetamine of communism and socialism to get you a couple ratings points is not worth it long term. You will not win. You're going to lose every moderate, every swing voter, every adult in the room is not voting for a socialist communist lunacy.
We'll see.
They're going to implode the Democratic Party. All right, we'll leave off the other hot SCOTUS summit for another time. Let's talk about Gavin with the good hair Newsom. Says he just balanced California budget. Newsom announced $351 billion in balance zero deficit budget through 2028. Over to you, Friedberg, from your bunker, the last California stand in the Friedberg
I'm going to call this the state of California.
the state
The
of
state
California, the
the
lowercase
state of
state.
That's right.
The
State
the
of
state.
California.
The state of the state.
And there were the state of the state. And there were
State of the
five chapters to this: ballooning costs, the accounting tricks, the revenue dependency problem, and now the big exodus and spiraling that's happening, and the looming unaccounted liabilities. These are the problems that California is facing as Gavin puts his bow on his final budget, calls it balanced, and walks away while the house burns. California's state budget ballooned from $215 billion a year in 2019, 6 years ago, to $355 billion today, so a 65% jump in the state budget. And there were a number of these kind of accounting tricks that took place to try and make it look like it's a balanced budget this year, but there's revenue and there's spending. When they call it a balanced budget, that's not the way we all talk about it in the business world, where you have like a P&L, you have revenue and expenses. They have revenue and expenses, and the expenses exceed the revenue. And that little difference, they do a bunch of borrowing against, and then they call it a balanced budget. So all that they've
So
done,
they were able to raise enough debt to cover their whole.
exactly. So there's somewhere between 20 and 40 billion of debt that they have a legal ability to just pencil away And that is now a liability that the state has, that the taxpayers are all going to have to pay at some point, that allows them to, quote, balance the budget this year. And I'm not going to get into all the details of what went into this budget, all the money that's being spent. It's crazy. But I think that's what's worth taking note of is the revenue dependency the state has. As you all know, the top tax rate in California is 14.4% today. Personal income tax is $142 billion of the state's revenue. Okay, that is $211 billion of revenue the state generates. 142 of it comes from personal income tax. The top 1%, 150,000 people, pay $70 billion, pay half of that tax, of that income. So $70 billion of the state's $210 billion income comes from just the top 1% of payers, 150,000 people, who are already paying the highest tax rate in the country. The top 1,000 people in the state of California pay roughly $22 billion a year. So more than 11% of the state's income. The corporate tax is one of the highest in the country at 8.9%, $43 billion. So it's cheaper to move out of state. If you look at some of the other states, Florida, 5.5%, Texas, Tennessee's 6.5%, Texas is 0. So now if you kind of look at what's happening, there's a massive exodus underway. The corporate exodus, because of the high tax rates, since 2019, at least 15 Fortune 500 companies have moved out of California, moved their headquarters out, not to mention all the local franchises and everything that moved out. 2,100 companies that are mid or large size have moved out of California since 2019. At least 5% of California jobs have been lost as these companies have moved out of the state. And this is the more important and crazy statistic. No one pays attention to this, but we are seeing an average annual exodus of 1.5% personal income, meaning the AGI, the adjusted gross income. So people that earn money, about 1 to 1.5% of that income is leaving the state every year right now. That might not sound like a lot, but after 10 years, you've seen 15% of the state's income leave, and obviously with the new billionaire tax that's being proposed, we're going to see an acceleration as the numbers come out for 2025. There's, as we all know, personal friends that have left the state in 25, and many more that'll leave in 26, including our friend David Sachs. So there is a spiraling of loss of revenue while there is a ballooning in costs. And this is fundamental to the spiraling problem that's occurring. So now, in order to try and make more money, the state has to go further down. They can't just go to the corporates and the high net worth earners. They're going to go to the average Californian. So they're increasing sales tax rates this year by creating a new sales tax on software. So if you buy Microsoft Word, or you pay for your Gmail subscription, or even your ChatGPT account, you have to pay an 8% sales tax on that this year. They're estimating that that sales tax is a brand new one. It'll generate about $1 million a year in incremental revenue for the state. They're also creating a new tax on healthcare insurance that corporates are going to have to pay. That's ultimately going to pass down to the individual. That's going to create another $2 billion a year in taxes on health insurance. The final thing that they did, which we all know about, is they made the temporary top income tax bracket permanent. So, it was only meant to be a temporary to bridge a major budget deficit problem back in 2012, 13.3%, and that became permanent, and now it's increased to 14.4%. So this is the spiraling that takes place. The costs are ballooning, the revenue is leaving, and now there's a scrambling underway in the state of California to try and make up this difference, and they're still falling short. In the out years, 2028, 29, the projection is $40 billion a year in budget deficits every year. Now, looming over the state of California is the fact that there's this insane unaccounted debt problem. California already has $1.4 trillion in public debt. The state has $500 billion, and the local governments have another, call it $800 billion. The state has a reported $664 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. That number, by many estimates, is closer to $1.5 trillion. And then there's a retiree healthcare obligation deficit of $175 billion. You add this all up, there's somewhere around $1.5 to $2 trillion of incremental liabilities that the state has to come up with. And remember, all of those pension liabilities, that $1 trillion plus of pension liabilities, sits senior to the bonds of the state of California because of something that's known as the California rule. So the state has this looming kind of cliff ahead of it, and there's already the spiraling problem where they're increasing costs because of the demands of the unions and the cost of living and so on. And there's an exodus of corporations and high net worth individuals that pay the taxes. So I would argue that Governor Newsom did not exactly put a bow tie on the budget and create a balanced budget and leave California in a great state as he is wrapping up his final term and his final budget here in the state. But in fact, I think that this state, which, as I've said in the past, threatens to bring down the union, is on the brink of defaults that are going to be so significant that if the federal government was called in to bail them out, because the state cannot declare bankruptcy legally, then all of the red states and all of the other taxpayers in the United States would say, why the hell should I pay federal taxes to bail out California? And I think that's what the story will be over the next decade with the state.
So you predict
the fiscal condition.
AOC and Mondami, president, vice president, AOC, Mondami,
I do predict, yeah, so I predict AOC will be president. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of dispersion in what can happen here, but I would say AOC would be my front runner based on the movement for the extraordinary cost of living in the United States right now, largely because of government spending. Yep. The fact that people are seeing this wealth disparity, those two things are going to continue to drive the socialist movement over the next 24 months. And if AOC comes in and they bail out California and they federalize California's liabilities, you're going to see parts of this union, the red states, as they're called, the Texas of the world, that are going to say, why should we be part of this union anymore? We don't want to pay for all of these liabilities that these blue states have accrued and that we are now being asked to bail out. And that is where I think you face a crisis of the union in the years ahead.
Okay. Sachs, Texas,
and I think California's the first. Yeah.
In this scenario, I mean, it's pretty far-fetched, but it's not far-fetched that you would need a federal bailout to get California out of this in the next couple of years, and the government needs a bailout itself with a massive $2-3 trillion a year for the next couple of years. So that's your market.
There's something that's going to happen. I think that Freeberg is right up until the point of the federal absorption. I think what will happen is that you will wipe out the California pensions, then you'll wipe out the pension obligations, and you'll do some sort of negotiated settlement. And I think that's where you're going to have a wholesale replacement of the California Constitution. You'll have a complete redistricting. I mean, you will have a complete red wave in the state. And you will disassemble and dismantle everything that caused California to be so poorly run that got them to this place. So I agree with David. All of the issues that he painted it's unbelievable. By the way, there's an incredible tweet. Her name is Joanna Ives. Maybe you can find it, but she compared the last 8 years of DeSantis versus J.B. Pritzker. And I asked my team, hey, can you create a table that actually adds Newsom to the list so that you can do the 3-person comparison? Because it's quite staggering how broken these blue states have become and how they continue to try to spend their way out of what is being shown is just general incompetence. They're not good at managing. They're not good at running things. They're not good at delivering results. And unfortunately, until they feel the brunt of what mismanagement actually means, which is that all the people that have paid into this system, sadly and unfortunately and avoidably, will be the ones that get punished. We will unfortunately not learn in California. Find this tweet and read it, and you would just be shocked at how unbelievably good DeSantis has been in running Florida and how unbelievably tragically bad J.B. Pritzker is. And then just ask your favorite AI, compare California on the spectrum of Florida versus Illinois, and what you'll find is California is even worse than Illinois in most of those comparisons.
Sachs, you want to give us the last word here?
Yeah, I guess my decision to go to Texas is better. I mean, I said when this BTA thing, the so-called Billionaire Tax Act, was proposed, and everyone was saying it's very low probability this happens. I was like, I don't really see why it would be low probability. I think it's going to get on the ballot. All you have to do is collect a certain number of signatures. It's not that hard. And then once it's on the ballot, I don't see why it would pass. And everyone's like, no, Gavin Newsom has assured us that he'll kill it. He'll make some backroom deal, get rid of it. And on the day, the final day, where BTA was going to be dropped from the ballot or not, Newsom came out with a video on X where he basically endorsed more taxes on billionaires. And this was right after the DSA candidates wanted more. So he sees the writing on the wall. He's not going to come out
publicly. The problem with the billionaire tax is that if it does get passed, and it isn't obviated by the 3 other ballot initiatives that actually negate it, you're going to have 200 or 300 individual lawsuits that will take a decade to meander through the courts, and ultimately, I think a lot of people have standing here. And I just wonder, what will they have proven at that point? Because it'll be a decade later. It'll be 2036, and the California government will have had to spend millions of dollars in legal fees to fight out these billionaires, all to end up losing at the Supreme Court anyways.
By then, we'll probably have like a federal wealth tax or something like that.
The tragedy is that California, at various points in recent history, has had a surplus because of the massive tax base from Silicon Valley. They could have managed this. Their incompetence, their selfishness, and their corruption is what has caused this. They could have, if any state could have balanced its budget, it is California because of our massive tax
There
receipts.
needs to be a hard landing. I really hope it doesn't result in the wipeout of these pensions. I think the pensioners should be extremely upset with
It's not gonna
California
happen.
Democratic politics.
Look, this idea that somehow things get bad enough where you get a red wave, super blue California, and everything gets magically fixed, not gonna happen. What's gonna happen is a blue state's gonna get bluer. And
That's right. Socialism.
the remedy for more and more socialism is going to be to intensify the socialism. And there's going to be a giant final confiscation.
And we're going to deal with the California bankruptcy in the next 10 years. And it is unfortunately, it will unfortunately result in a complete restructuring of those debt and obligations. And this is where I think you're going to wipe out a lot of these things that people are guaranteed. I don't think we're going to see these pensions.
If you just look at the budget per person, places like Texas and Florida spend about $5,000 per citizen on services. If you divide the budget by population, you look at New York City, it's close to $13,000, and you look at California, close to $9,000, and you simply do not get 2 or 2.5 times or 2.x times the value of living in those states in terms of services. And it's competence, yes, it's worse. And it really, the more you look to that state government to solve your problems, the more problems you will have. In Texas, if you've got a
It also
ranch,
just seems,
it's up
it
to
also
you.
just seems these blue states attract these derelict, incompetent people. I mean,
Grifters,
Well, look, let me explain.
incompetence.
they're so incompetent. My
Yes,
God,
it
they're
has
so
to do with
bad.
competence. And it also is the populace being self-reliant. You live in Texas,
No.
when you get your ranch, they say, hey, here's your ranch, and then it's up to you to figure out, hey, who's going to pick up my garbage? And, oh, do I want a well? Do I want to use the city water? What's my energy situation going to be? And people make these kind of thoughtful decisions for us. They don't look to the state for every single handout or hand-holding. There's a ruggedness and a rugged individualism and self-reliance that makes the state not have to tax everybody to 54, 60, 65%. I guarantee you, Friedberg and Schwab, you will be paying 60 to 65% tax if you stay in California. And I tell you, New York, it's at 54 right now. I guarantee you it breaks 60 or it will be proposed to break 50. We'll see if they stop it by the end of Mondami's reign in my hometown.
Look, let me tell you what leftism is, okay? It's basically just people trying to string together words to justify taking your money, okay? And they're just experimenting. It's like monkeys typing on a keyboard with words to try and hack everyone's brains to basically figure out how to steal all of their money. And some of those words are virtue signaling, some of them are guilt, tripping, moral
Equity.
accusations. Whatever it is, there's always
Equity's
just the
things.
words. But it's never to solve a problem. In fact, all the problems just get worse. It's just to figure out how to separate you from your money. And I had this thought when I saw that, like, Mackenzie Bezos, just giving away like $26 million, $26 million of Jeff Bezos' money to all these left-wing bosses.
Hey, she earned it too.
And well, but putting that aside, she gave away all this money. I'm like, oh, okay, so now, like, world hunger is fixed, right? Because remember how they told us that it was because of Elon Musk's greed that he refused to hand over, he didn't fork over a big chunk of his money, and with that money, we could have fed the whole world to solve world hunger. So why isn't the problem solved now that she just donated $26 billion? That's what they said Elon needed to do. to solve world hunger. They always treat your money as if it belongs to them or belongs to the government, and it's your greed and selfishness that's creating all these problems. None of these problems have been fixed. What's the proof that any of that money did anything? All it did was went to line the pockets of all these leftist NGOs, and buy them more houses or
She would have been better off investing in Ohalo
No
and
problems get
other
solved.
companies. Literally, I hate to break this news.
What does the poly market say on Gavin's chances of?
Oh, he's down to. I think he's plummeting. Yeah, Gavin's down to 20. He peaked at 40.
That's quite high.
I mean, I think people are realizing it's a great haircut and, a really smooth talker. But just like he stole other things in his life, he's going to steal your money. Period. Full stop. I'm not going to get into it.
I think he's lower in these polls because the Democratic Party is moving left. Is moving to
Yes, look at the
and
OC.
people think he's too moderate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the OC's going up. It was John Osmo, guys from out of nowhere. They're all to the left of Gavin Newsom. So Newsom's problem, and this is why he put out that video on the day that he was supposed to kill the VTA. He puts out a video endorsing billionaire taxes, is because he needs to position himself to be more DSA adjacent.
Well, to be fair to Newsom, he also on the same day said he's against the Billionaire Tax Act. He's voting against it. This was his hedging video, which is to kind of zoom out his policy on, hey, this BTA doesn't make sense, but I do agree we need more taxation. I think was kind of
we
Yeah, it was his
all
hedge,
agreed
but also
on
he failed to kill BTA. Everyone thought, all these California billionaires and these chat groups thought Newsom would be their savior.
That's right.
And that was a big mistake.
What's it like? Besides, what's it like in that group chat? Tell us about that group chat. What's it like in there? What's the meme? What's the meme like in there? Woo! In the billionaire group chat.
It's 8:06 p.m. here. I have a meeting I have to go to. I want to say I love you and I miss all of you. And I want to say.
Could AI help you do more work you love? Workday is the AI platform for HR and finance that actually knows your business. We help you handle the have to-dos so you can focus on the can't-be to-dos. It's the new Workday.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So, whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that looks better for you and your family, they make it.
We're going to take a little visit to an outdoor sauna in the midst of a Minnesota winter, where a mug made from ice was inspired. It has since gone on to sell over 4,000 units. It's called the Nice Mug. The Nice Mug, the frozen tundra of the Minnesota winter, its owner is in negotiations to bring it to National Hockey League fans. And it's all because one man wanted a cold beer in a sauna. This hardy Viking, who's also a manager for a food company, that's really what he is, that's his day job, brings his invention to life. He funds it with a crowdfunding campaign that is now taking this life-changing beverage holder to the masses. This was a fun one to work on a few years ago. I'm going to bring you a couple updates along the way. Hold on to your self-actualization. First, you need your Nice Mug. All right, details coming up. You know what happens with a lot of side projects. First, it's just an idea. Then suddenly you need a real website, not something that looks like it was thrown together in an afternoon. Well, that's where Framer comes in. Framer is a professional website platform built for creators, teams, and businesses that care about getting the details right. They have integrated AI agents directly into the workflow. Instead of generating something in one tool and then building it somewhere else, the agent is working right where the actual site lives. You get to design pages, create content, manage your CMS, improve SEO, all that kind of stuff, and all on the same canvas. The agents help move things forward quickly, but you're still making the decisions. It's not just for small projects. Big companies like Perplexity use it as well. Learn how you can get more out of your site from a Framer specialist, or get started building for free today at framer.com/hustle for 30% off the Framer Pro annual plan. That's framer.com/hustle for 30% off. Framer.com/hustle. Rules and restrictions may apply. This episode is powered by AT&T Business. Looking back at the early days of this business, or a lot of my businesses, I can say I did a lot of my best work in some strange places. Could be office space that was actually just a parked car or a decent signal, or a coffee shop where I had to buy muffins and more coffee every hour just to keep using their Wi-Fi. Now, at the time, you tell yourself that's just the hustle. But hey, AT&T Business actually asked me recently about the moment when I realized it's a level up for things getting.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Welcome to Sephora. I'm looking for a perfume that's not too perfumey. I got you.
Zero moisturizer.
Means
Things to talk about with you, George. First off, happy 250th birthday here to America. We're just a couple days away from it. You live in Puerto Rico. Does that add a
No, Medellin.
spin on it?
Medellin.
Oh, you're in Medellin. What?
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah, it does put a different spin on it.
I know, yeah.
To answer your question.
I knew that too, but yeah, of course, the place is a completely different spin because nobody cares about America's 250s down there. But you guys have yourselves a new president, right?
Yeah. What's weird is nobody's talking about it. I hear a couple people just here and there that are kind of neck deep in the macro space, especially in emerging markets, talking about the big shift to the right in South America.
Well, because it's a big shift. It's not just a regular torch passing. Yeah.
Huge. Yeah, and you see the huge bifurcation. And very similar to what you see in the United States, where the political parties are going to the extremes.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it down here in South America as well. In the case of Colombia, we just had the election last weekend, and the two guys, basically a complete socialist. His father was actually a communist. And I mean, he was absolutely terrible.
You're talking about the president who just lost, right?
Well, so the president that was there for 4 years, Petro, he was out regardless.
Okay.
So he was kind of handing the torch to his buddy, who was just as much of a socialist, if not more, than he was. I mean, that guy. He was up there with the guy in New York City.
He was your version of Mamdani?
Probably even further to the left. And then the other guy was he had never been in politics before. Very similar to Malay. And he's not as libertarian, but he's definitely far right. Really tough on crime and all these other things, and very pro-business. And the pro-business guy won. And he'd never been in politics in his life. He was just a former lawyer.
So it was kind of like a Mamdani versus Trump candidate for you?
I would say Mamdani versus Malay.
Okay. But anyway, so he won, and this El Tigre guy, the guy who won, he's more West friendly or more U.S. friendly, right? So So hopefully this bodes well for just more commerce, more business, more ties between Colombia.
I mean, you can tell that's the market expectation just through the currency.
Yeah.
Because as he was gaining in popularity for the poly market prior to the election, the currency was appreciating on that.
Okay. Because people are sort of expecting Malay type results from him, I guess, right?
Yeah, more liberty for the central bank to increase interest rates, combat local inflation. So you got interest rate differentials, more friendly to the United States, more dollars coming in, less deficits. There's a lot of variables in there.
Okay, this wasn't what I expected to talk about with you when you jumped on here, but it's actually really interesting, especially in light of the whole kind of Monroe Doctrine 2.0. We want to have, America's looking to have better ties, trade and otherwise, with its Western Hemisphere neighbors. And we've seen, South America, increasingly shifting towards the kind of regimes that want to work with the U.S. Colombia was one of the last ones that was a real holdout. That's now tipped, at least, it seems. And I think the last really big one left is Brazil, and they have elections later this year. Do you have any sort of reading of the tea leaves how that one might go?
No, because I only followed Colombia to the extent that I did, just because I live here. And so it directly impacted me. But outside of that, I more so focus on the United States. So the one thing that I do think is really interesting, and I don't know if it will play out in Brazil or not, but the left is getting further left, And in a lot of places, the right is getting further right. And I think that's a trend that you're going to see for a long time to come, unfortunately. And you're going to have the left win the presidency, and then the next time the right's going to win, they're just going to go back and forth and back and forth, just because the real underlying issues aren't being addressed. And that's like in the United States, obviously the K-shaped economy, which you refer to all the time.
Sure.
I think you have the AI capex spend that's really propping up the U.S. economy, but it's not impacting that many people. You have the young people that are finding it tough to afford housing, start a family. With Gen Z, they're having a tough time dating. You can see that with, I forgot what dating app it is, but one of the CEOs came out and said that Gen Z, they're like, it's non-existent. So you have a lot of indicators to where the social unrest is starting to bubble up more and more and more. And when that happens, people just look to politicians to solve their problems, unfortunately. And the politicians, whether they're on the left or the right, in my view, just make it worse. And so then you just get this kind of pendulum swinging back and forth and back and forth. But each time the pendulum goes this way and that way, it goes further to the right or further to the left.
Yeah. And each new party just spends its time dismantling what was done before. Usually doesn't have a chance to get much done before the next election comes, and they get kicked out, and then it goes back the other way. So it's interesting. So I was thinking we might kind of build up to this in the discussion, but why don't we just grab it by the throat right now, George? So let's talk about that. So in the U.S., it's a really interesting time in the U.S. Because there's the battle that you're talking about, and the left is definitely going far more extreme now than it has before. Like the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is really, taking control. They got a lot of confidence now, not just with Mondami, who won in New York, but he just endorsed people for a couple of elections that were just held, and all of his endorsed candidates won. So all of a sudden, he's like the new kingmaker on the left, and a lot of the traditional Democrats are freaking out because they feel like they've kind of lost control now. These new upstarts that have come in. Obviously, on the current administration side, we've got Republicans in charge, Trump. They're trying to say, hey, look, we've actually laid all the groundwork for our the prosperity that we want to build, the direction we want to take the country in. But it's kind of been sidelined by the whole Iran war thing. So there's just a lot of dust up in the air right now about this, but there's a lot of angst, frustration, and I think the challenge that I see here is, even if you put in policies that you think are going to lead to greater prosperity down the road, with this K-shaped economy that you mentioned, the momentum that the economy has right now, the economy is doing fairly okay in the U.S., on average. But it's like, I ask this question a lot, and I hate asking it this way, but it's like the bottom leg of the K, it almost doesn't matter how much they're suffering right now, as long as the top arm of the K is keeping the averages going well. Yeah. So you can run the economy on that. You can have markets near all-time highs like they are right now. You can have good economic growth. But along the way, you're just losing more and more people on that bottom leg of the K who are saying, I got to do something different. This is not working for me. It might be working for the rich guys, but it's not working for me. So it's understandable that there's this movement, especially amongst the young, as you were saying, who just don't have a lot of hope looking at the current playbook. And so they're saying, well, I just got to try something different. And sure, this guy's promising me some free stuff. My older parents are telling me socialism's not the answer. It's going to suck for all of us. But it already sucks for me now, I may as well go for the guy who's promising free stuff. So I guess the question is like, is there a way to kind of write this where we bring a greater part of the populace along with us, or is this thing just kind of destined to kind of just break down, and then maybe we'll get something better out of the problem?
Well, I think the trend is to the latter.
Yeah. And turn it up, I didn't mean break down, but I mean be torn down, where just enough of the populace says, screw it, I don't have any faith left in the status quo, let's just break the whole thing and build something new.
Yeah, I think what you have to do is start by asking what created the wealth to begin with. And what created the wealth to begin with was not politicians. It wasn't government intervention. It wasn't policy.
Yeah, it's free market.
That's right. It's free market capitalism. That's the key. Because capitalism, I hate to use that term without free market in front of it. Because when you just say capitalism, you know, what the young people think is, well, it's just bailing out Wall Street during the GFC. Because we're prioritizing, you know, these private entities over the individuals in the real economy, and therefore that's capitalism. That's not capitalism in any way, shape, or form. Like Milton Friedman said, with capitalism, the loss part is just as important, if not more important, than the profit. You have to let businesses fail. And that's why I always start by saying free market capitalism, because in a free market, the government isn't intervening and picking winners and losers. So if you understand that that's what made us unique as a country, is free market capitalism, that's the answer. So you have to look at you know, that's the answer to getting us out of this malaise, let's say. You have to free things up. You have to let businesses go bust. You have to make sure that there's not this moral hazard. And when you come out the other side, you're going to have a much stronger base to build on, a much stronger foundation. And then you're going to have, you know, banks lending to mid, small-sized businesses, and you're going to have that job creation. It's going to give a lot more opportunity to the young people out there, and it's likely going to bring down home prices. It's likely going to bring down asset prices, which negatively impacts the baby boomers and whatnot, but it helps the next generation, and it sets the stage for generations to come. So whenever you're looking at a government policy, or anyone is looking at a government policy, I always try to look at it through that lens to start with. You know, is this increasing free market capitalism, or is it decreasing free market capitalism? Most of what the Democrats want to do, especially with the kid in New York, is obviously decreasing free market capitalism substantially. But to be fair, a lot of the policies from the Trump administration and the Republicans have decreased free market capitalism as well. If you're taking a position in NVIDIA, or in some sort of like rare earth company or something like that, that's not increasing free market capitalism by definition. That is decreasing free market capitalism.
Right. And you mean the government taking a position in those companies? Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Or, you know, bailing out this entity, or bailing out that entity, or bailing out OpenAI, which they might have to do, you know, due to this AI bubble. You know, we got to keep up with China. We got to keep up with China, and therefore that's the justification for the government to step in and prop up all these companies that otherwise might go bust. And then what would happen if the government wouldn't step in? We'll just use OpenAI as an example. And this isn't a prediction, we're just using it for the thought experiment here. If they go to the government and say, look, we can't raise any more money for this CapEx, you know, we've got $20 a month coming in for these subscribers, but that ain't cutting it, you know, so we need to go hat in hand to the government. If the government would just say, pound sand, this is a free market, you chose to make those mistakes, you got to live with it, then they go bust, but they don't go away. It's not like they just disappear out of the ether. The companies that actually made good decisions in the AI space would take over those assets.
Well, by their IP, yeah.
Yeah, and then the whole ecosystem would be much stronger as a result. But what's happened over the course of the last few decades is that we just won't let anyone fail. And if you don't let anyone fail, the system just gets weaker and weaker and weaker. It's very similar to, you know, evolution, and you're out there on the Sahara, and you got a herd of lions. I think it's a herd, but you got a group of lions, and what happens if one gets sick?
Lions, but yeah.
Pride, there you go, thank you. A pride of lions, and one gets sick or can't mate or something like that, and they're gone. Like their genes are wiped out of existence. And the strong lions, they're the ones that are going to mate, and that makes the pride, or the group of lions in general, stronger and stronger and stronger. But what we've done is we don't let the sickly ones go off to the wayside. We make them produce more than the ones that are really strong. And so what do you expect to happen to the gene pool? It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And that's what we've seen with the economy.
So I'm so glad you brought it here. The discussion I've been finding myself having frequently or recently on this channel is, you know, I it's not my job to tell people what to do or how to think or vote or whatnot. You know, I just hopefully give them good information and let them make their decisions. But one area where I do feel I've been feeling increasingly it's important for me to put my own finger on the thumb, is to say, we do have a lot of, the system's not perfect, we do have a lot of issues, but I'm pretty positive the answer is not embracing the model that we know has a 0% success track record in economic history, which is socialism, right? And so the effort should be fixing what is not working well right now with capitalism. And I think to your point, and I really like it, I'm going to steal it going forward, I think the key thing to focus on is the free market part, right? So right now we have what's called, you can call it corporatism, you can call it crony capitalism, whatever. There's a lot of ways in which capitalism has been increasingly captured, and we need to free it from that. And you're nodding on here, but I do think, this is just me opining between you and me, George, maybe the folks watching don't care about this, but I do feel like maybe this is a little bit of responsibility that guys like you and I have platforms bear, given the good fortune that we've had to build up audiences, is to try to help people realize this, because I understand the thinking of the younger generation, just to look at it and say, what you hear a lot is capitalism's failed, right? And it isn't that it's failed, it's just been compromised. So don't throw out capitalism, don't throw out the model that actually we know can work really well, is working the right way. Focus on fixing it, don't abandon it and jump onto something that we know for sure is a total failure.
Yeah, you have to just go back throughout history and look at what's worked. Whether it's the delta between North Korea and South Korea,
right?
Whether it's Hong Kong and mainland China 30 years ago.
Hong Kong, yeah.
Yeah, just look at Singapore is another great example. Just look at what's worked and what hasn't worked. And to your earlier point, it's hard to find an example without like a boom in commodities or something where socialism really worked well. And it's very easy to find examples where free market capitalism has worked extremely well. Now, the thing is, it's not perfect, but that goes back to what you're saying. And if we could do one thing as content creators for the younger generation, I think it's turning them on to people like Thomas Sowell. And one of the greatest things I've ever heard Thomas Sowell say, and I repeat it over and over and over again, is there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. And I think one of the big problems with the way human beings tend to think is they look for solutions. So as an example, if you say, okay, well, we need to go in the direction of more free market capitalism, they'll say, oh, no, we can't do that because that produces inequality. Okay, well, we're not looking for a solution. There is no perfect outcome because we're imperfect human beings in an imperfect world. So what you have to do is you have to look for the least bad strategy, right? You have to look for the least bad system. And the least bad system is going to be free market capitalism. That's not saying that it's perfect. That's not saying that it doesn't have flaws. That's just saying that it has a lot fewer flaws than all the alternatives. And that's what Thomas Sowell really tries to get through with that very, very simple saying. There are no solutions, there are only trade-offs.
That is so accurate in lives. And what breaks my heart about you're saying, we need to expose the folks like Thomas Sowell, I totally agree. We're not going to have Thomas Sowell around for much longer because he's like, what, 95 or something at this point?
Yeah, he's probably still writing books too.
He is, and he's written a phenomenal number. But hopefully we have, the future create some more Thomas Sowells to pick up the torch.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm really positive, Adam, because you and I are nowhere close to Thomas Sowell or Milton Friedman or Hayek or any of those guys. But back then, Milton Friedman, he had a huge, huge influence on people. He had a dynamic personality, he could speak really well, really smart guy. And although there might not be a Milton Friedman or a Thomas Sowell today, there's a lot of little teeny Thomas Sowells and little teeny Milton Friedmans. And if you want to put you and I in that category, there's a lot of quote-unquote influencers out there. So we might not have a Thomas Sowell, but we've got 10,000 little Thomas Sowells that are standing on his shoulders, hopefully repeating the same messages.
Yeah.
And if we do that, then we can make maybe collectively as big of a difference as they made.
So I certainly hope so, and I would be honored to be on the JV team that you're describing. But let me just say too, it's not just you and I, George. It's really everybody watching this video, folks that watch your videos. We all have the ability, as we learn, about how the economic system works, how capitalism should work, and when it's working well. It's on us, all of us, to pass that along to our children, pass it along to folks in our community who are willing to listen, and to be little repeaters of the message of those great minds that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Super interesting conversation so far. This was not where I was expecting us to go here, compared before, but it was great. I'm so glad we hit this day.
Now let's talk about money. Let's talk about money.
Let's actually talk about money. Because you've actually been talking a lot about this recently. Before we got on here, you said, hey, I've got some thoughts about the dollar, especially versus a lot of the Asian currencies that are out there. I guess why don't we start there? It's been an interesting year with the dollar. The dollar has been strengthening this year versus most other currencies. War definitely kind of added to that dynamic a bit here. It's had a lot of knock-on effects for a number of asset prices, particularly the price of precious metals, things like Bitcoin. I guess why don't we start with you laying out your thesis, then we'll dig into it from there.
Yeah, I think what I'd encourage your viewers to do first and foremost is, yes, look at a chart of the Dixie, but realize that's 57% euro, and I think 14% yen. And when you actually set that aside and just look at the cross rates between the dollar and like the Indian rupee, the Indonesian rupee, the South Korean won, Japanese yen, and you look at like a 1-year chart or a 5-year chart, and it is unbelievable, the depreciation of those currencies versus the dollar. And as Americans, I don't think we appreciate why that matters. And not only why it matters to the global economy, but why it matters to Americans in the United States, because we're like, okay, the yen's trading at 162, who cares? So what?
Right. I think the only thing the average person takes is, hey, I hear it's a great time to go travel to Japan. Sounds really cheap.
Well, it is if you have dollars. But the problem there is commodities and a lot of the inputs that Japan has to import, they have to, there's very inelastic demand. They're denominated in dollars. So what you have to realize as an American is we don't have this problem. We're extremely unique, where if we have to bring in import commodities, if we have to import energy, something like that, we don't have to worry about the cross rate between the dollar and XYZ, because that barrel of oil that's coming in is denominated in dollars. But if you're Japan, you have to worry about two things. You have to worry about the price of oil, and you have to worry about your currency versus the dollar. So as an example, let's say that the barrel of oil is $100 and it stays $100, but the yen goes from 100 to 200. Well, now all of a sudden you need twice as many yen to buy that one barrel of oil. And you say, okay, George, and I get it, but again, who cares? Well, let's bring this back to what's happened more recently in the United States. We've had gas prices go up. And when gas goes from whatever it was, $3 up to $5, people freak out. And rightfully so, because they've got to pull spending from discretionary, they've got to pull spending from other areas, because that demand for gas is very inelastic. And so, and then obviously that gas goes into transportation, which goes into transport of goods. And so it has this ripple effect through the economy where prices in general tend to go up. So just think, if you're a Japanese person and your yen goes from 100 up to 200, the price of that gallon of gas doesn't go from $3 to $5. It goes to $6. And then if you have the Straits of Hormuz closed down and oil goes from, let's just say 65 up to 120, it's down to 70 now, but it goes up to 120, you get that big spike. Now all of a sudden you're paying $8 a gallon for gas. So what Japan does is they can't have that, because that would lead to the social unrest. If we were talking extreme social unrest that we were talking about earlier. So they have to subsidize the wholesalers, the refiners, So what happens is that if they're, if the market price, let's just say, is $2 a gallon, and to sell it at $1, the government has to pay that person the dollar difference, right? So then they have more and more yen that they have to sell back out in the FX market to buy the dollars they need to get the future inputs. You see? And so that's increasing the supply of dollars, it's increasing the demand, increasing the supply of yen, it's increasing the demand for dollars, and then you get the yen going down further and further and further to where the government has to step in and quote unquote defend the currency. And that's what they've been doing at 160. But it's at 162 right now. And you know, because you watch markets, your audience might not know, that in the past year or so, year and a half, every time that the yen has gotten 160, the Ministry of Finance or the BOJ, comes in and defends the currency. How do they do that? They take their dollar FX reserves, they sell them, kind of the mirror image of what we're talking about. They sell them into the market and buy yen, so it increases the supply of dollars, increases demand for yen, and then you have the yen briefly appreciate. So it goes from 160, let's say, down to 140, but eventually it goes back up to the 160 mark, and like I said, we're at 162 right now, and that works until you run out of FX reserves. Now you got a problem. Now you got a big problem. You can sell treasuries, you can sell gold, but at a certain point, you might have to take the only asset that's on your balance sheet if you're Japan, and that would be yen, to sell to get those dollars that you have to have. And in that case, then you go into a death spiral, right? And so so why does this matter for people in the United States, and why do I think this is so important? I think it's actually even more important than the dollar versus goods and services in the United States, or said another way, the inflation rate. It's because we have to realize that although we import a lot of stuff into the United States, we export a lot as well. And we're exporting to those countries who are getting decimated by the dollar going higher and higher and higher. So at a certain point, the dollar is destroying our trading partners. The dollar is destroying our customers. And I think that only goes so far to the point where you get like a Plaza Accord 2.0, because it doesn't serve the dollar. We'll just use the DXY as a proxy. The dollar going to 105 or 120 or even higher, that doesn't do anyone any good, on net balance. It's bad for the United States, it's bad for all these other countries. And so that's when I think they might have to come in and intervene. And you say, well, what if the dollar goes down? The way it's structured, it's very difficult for the dollar to go down to 80, 85. As we've seen, it goes down to 97, it goes down to 96. But you kind of trade in a range there where the way that the dollars were created, the way the monetary system is set up, it creates a constant bid for the dollar.
For dollars.
That's right, because those dollars are lent into existence. And if your audience could take one thing away from this conversation that I think would give them an edge in investing and figuring out how the dollar works in currencies, is to understand that dollars aren't just an asset on a balance sheet. Dollars are simultaneously a liability on a balance sheet. And because they're a liability, that means there's future demand for almost every single dollar that exists right now. So as an example, if I'm a bank and I give you a mortgage, let's say you want to buy a house for 500 grand or something, those dollars didn't exist. People think that I'm taking dollars from over here and giving them to you. That's not what happens with the banks. They're creating brand new dollars that didn't exist. They're giving them to you. But think about what we've done. Those dollars are now an asset. So if you give those dollars to the seller, the house you're buying, it's on their balance sheet, it's an asset. But remember, those dollars are still on your balance sheet as a liability. Because at some point in the future, probably monthly, you're going to have to find dollars in order to pay back that loan. And that is a bid. That's a constant demand for dollars. And so, again, I think a great takeaway from this conversation, if people just want one, would be when you're looking at the dollar, you have to realize that it's not just an asset, but it's a liability. That liability represents a constant demand or constant bid for the dollar.
This episode is brought to you by Subaru. You know that place your mind...
Let's say, where does this go looking out across the rest of the year? right? I can listen to what you say, George, and say, okay, so as these countries struggle under the rise of the dollar versus their currency, especially while we still have high, when oil prices are coming down, but you know, we still have things that are both the nominal increase in the dollar cost plus the dollar relative to your currency going in the wrong direction in these countries. It's sort of like when the U.S. catches a cold, the rest of the world, you know, gets the flu or whatever. U.S. gets the sniffles, the rest of the world gets the flu. Dollars rising here. They are increasingly not able to buy our exports, right? So we start seeing our exports come down or get compromised or not grow the way that we want. Maybe if they get really in trouble, as you said earlier, markets, right? So if those foreigners are having to start to sell those capital, those assets just to get by, these are things that all of a sudden it's not their problem, it's our problem too. So do you expect something to happen going forward, or do you expect a different outcome?
I would expect it with commercial real estate. I'd expect it to be private credit. I don't know that I'd expect it in the treasury market. And the reason I wouldn't expect it in the treasury market is because the marginal buyer and seller there is going to be the banks. And we've gone into that in the past, so I won't go into it here. But you don't have that banking bid, if the spread gets too high above nominal GDP for private credit. And so, let me use an example I used in a recent video for people to, I think, understand this a little bit better. We'll use Toyota as just a proxy for all of Japan. And so Toyota, they've got multiple ways to get those dollars they need that we're referring to. And number one is sell Toyotas to the United States. Because if you're selling those Toyotas in the United States, you're getting the dollars. And hopefully you're getting enough dollars. But again, that depends on the ratio of yen to dollar, right? And the price of oil. But let's assume that you're getting enough dollars that you need to go ahead and buy those inputs. The problem here, Adam, is if the global economy slows down, and then you're not selling as many Toyotas. And if you're not selling as many Toyotas, you don't have as many dollars coming in, and that puts you into a real compromising position. So what we're saying here with this kind of dollar death spiral going up, not down, it is reversible. But you would have to believe that the global economy is going to have to start doing better and better and better. So the trade and the circulation of those dollars is going to increase. And if you look at the polarization, if you look at all of these countries, if you look at fourth turning, if you look at it through that lens, I don't know that there's an extremely high probability that the global economy just starts to come together again and just start growing quickly. And I think we have to realize that it's not just about the supply of dollars, it's about the circulation. So a lot of people in the macro space always talk about, well, there's a shortage of dollars in India, there's a shortage of dollars in XYZ. And people struggle with that. It's like, what do you mean there's a shortage of dollars? There's $75 trillion outside the United States, let's say. It's not necessarily that they're saying there's a shortage of dollars. There's a shortage of circulation of dollars. So if the dollars are just all hidden, under your Adam Taggart's bed, then sure, there could be 75 trillion of them, but it's not going to be doing any good, and the whole system's going to blow up because those dollars that are circulating pay off that dollar-denominated debt. So I think it's very important that people look at the probabilities through the lens of what do you think is going to happen with the global economy. Is it going to speed up, or is it going to slow down? Because that tells you what's likely going to happen with the circulation of those dollars and the cash flow that's needed to service the debt.
Okay. So based on your best outlook for, again, let's say the rest of this year, trends going the right way or wrong?
I think the trends are going in the wrong way. And part of the reason is because I think we've had this shiny object called the Middle East for quite some time. And that's got everyone focused on short-term inflation because obviously we've seen the PCE go up, we've seen the CPI go up. So everyone's focused on now, Porsche comes out, he's talking hawkish, and he's trying to be all vulgar and all these things. And so now you get the 2-year treasury, which kind of bakes in Fed funds a little bit. It's kind of a mixed free market with Fed funds. You've got the 2-year treasury trading like 4.15 with the Fed funds at like 3.5. So what that means is the market has gone from expecting a Fed rate cut to likely expecting a Fed rate hike in the next, who knows, in the next couple quarters or something like that.
Yeah, I think I think they thought the first hike was going to be in September. They moved it up from December to September.
Yeah, and it's because of what you're seeing with that spike in oil really filtering through to a spike in the CPI. So then the market's expecting the Fed to look at that hawkishly because, they've got that balancing act between the unemployment rate and the CPI or the inflation. And you've got the unemployment rate that's pegged 4.3. It's been for quite some time. And so to err, or you want to focus on the inflation and to the degree which they can. So that's what the market is predicting. But I think that's just, we've got this shiny object, but now that shiny object isn't really there anymore. So we're going to go back over and focus on what we were focusing on prior to the Middle East. And what we were focusing on prior to the Middle East was private credit. Right?
Which has been surprisingly out of the headlines for the past month or so.
Right, because but it's been getting worse. It hasn't been getting better. So just because it hasn't really been out in the headlines, the trend is going the exact same direction. Even with BlackRock, they came out the other day and said that they've got another fund that they're halting redemptions on. And so I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, well, that's a nothing burger," because private credit is only $3 trillion versus whatever the mortgage-backed security market was in 08 at 60 trillion. But that's not understanding how the system works, because the system, the monetary system, it really works on confidence. And it has to have dollars circulating globally, and that's based on risk and counterparty risk and perceived counterparty risk. So if you have an event where perceived counterparty risk increases tremendously, yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's a $3 trillion asset or a $60 trillion asset. The net result is still the same, and that's the circulation of money and credit slows down, and that just exacerbates the problem we were just talking about with Japan. That means fewer dollars going in. That means more pressure on the yen. That means more pressure on their economy. That's more downward pressure on that customer of the United States.
Okay, so when you look at the rest of the year, it sounds like you see this trend. Ex-U.S. countries, particularly big net importers, continuing to struggle for the exchange rates that you were talking about. But even
and if they're to your earlier point, I forgot to mention that, but if they do continue to struggle, then that means they're selling dollar assets. And that could be treasuries, that could be gold, that could be private credit, that could be, a commercial real estate fund. There was a lot of reach for yield, with the quote unquote carry trade. And because of that carry trade unwinding, or them having to bring back or sell those dollar assets in order to get those dollars they need for whatever reason they need it, then that puts downward pressure on those asset prices in the United States.
Okay, so when you're in the U.S. and you're dealing with people starting to get much more concerned about counterparty risk, perhaps because the private credit issue is starting to really begin to scare people. One of the last things you want to have happen at that point in time is asset prices start going down materially, because it just makes them even more scared, and they tighten the reins even more, and it kind of becomes this vicious cycle, correct?
Yeah, so who's circulating the money and credit that's necessary for the economy, the oil in the car engine, if you will? That'd be the banking system.
Maybe the banking system. Exactly.
So you got to just put yourself in their position, right? You have an inside look at what's really happening with private credit in that black box. So if you're one of these banksters, you know what you can tell reality from the marketing spin you see on CNBC from Larry Fink. So you're like, hell no, there's no way that I'm going to go out there and lend into the real economy or lend here, circulate money and credit, because I think the risk is getting higher and higher and higher, and the reward just isn't there. So I'm just going to park my money in treasuries and sit back and wait and see how this plays out. And unfortunately, that doesn't circulate like we need, and that exacerbates the problem, especially when you have a lot of these private credit funds where their problem is liquidity. If it's not circulating, by definition, liquidity is being reduced.
Right. And of course, as banks tighten lending standards, well, then all sorts of parties that depend on getting loans can't get them, get fewer of them. And therefore, there's less economic growth, less ability for people to buy and afford assets, which starts to pull them down even further. And again, it becomes this vicious cycle.
And then you got to get price discovery on those assets that are inside the black box.
Yeah. So what we're describing there, I mean, really what we're describing here is what happened in 2008.
It's all the same because it's a credit cycle.
Exactly. So do you expect sort of something of similar magnitude coming this time around?
I don't know. I don't know the magnitude. I don't know the timing. I just know that cycles are going to cycle. And whether it's the business cycle or whether it's the credit cycle, these things always play out the same way, right? Warren Buffett talked about it when he was talking about the tide going in and out. You know, the tide was in for a long time. Now, as we all know, the tide, there's an argument that the tide, has gone up a little, but it hasn't gone up to the degree to which it needs to in order for us to see who's swimming naked. And the longer the tide is in, the more and more and more people that are swimming naked, because there's an incentive to do so, because what's the downside?
There's no downside.
Yeah, they're going to continue on forever. The problem with that is once the cycle starts going in reverse, and that's, in my view, what started back 6 months ago. Blue owl comes out, and then you get, and it's supposed to be a no big deal. We just sweep it under the rug, but then you get Blackstone, but then you get BlackRock, and then you get all these other funds, and you see that it just gets worse and worse and worse. Now, we're not at the point where everything is completely seized up, but we may be getting closer to that point, and I would point to SpaceX. It seems like, for the viewers, it probably sounds like we're bouncing all over the place here, but it's actually all tied into the same topic, and that's the circulation of money and credit, in this case dollars, right? Because when you look at SpaceX, it had, one of two major ways that it can go. Number one, it just, no pun intended, but it rockets higher and it just stays, up at the 220s, at the 230s, at the 250s, or it rockets higher and it starts coming back down to the point where it is today, maybe 150 or so, which is very near, if not below, the IPO price. And so then what this is telling you is that appetite for risk and the amount of capital that's out there to chase these speculative assets may be decreasing. And then you see that with Anthropic and OpenAI, calling time out on their IPO, saying, maybe we're going to hold off until 2027. Maybe we're going to hold off until later. That's an indication in and of itself that you're starting to see liquidity, I want to use that term, really dry up. And if we're only in inning 5 or 6 of this credit cycle, which I think everything would point to, then you got to assume that liquidity is going to decrease before it starts increasing again.
Where do you think the odds are that we'll look back years from now and say that SpaceX sort of top ticked the speculative era?
This is a Bose moment. You've been there. Small talk's going nowhere.
And as long as you've got that passive bid, which I think is obviously correlated to the unemployment rate, it's really hard for the S&P 500 to go down. It's like Michael Saylor buying Bitcoin every single week. It's hard. Well, I guess in that case the price did go down, but it's much harder for the S&P 500 to go down if you have that massive passive bid that's still in place. So as far as top ticking the market, I think that depends a lot on the underlying economy and the unemployment rate. And if we're at the point in the credit cycle where it does start to impact the unemployment rate, then you have the passive bid turning into a passive sell. Then for sure it would, I think, top tick, because now you've got the headwind as opposed to the tailwind. And, look, it's been a tailwind passive for the last 25 years.
I was going to say 2 decades at least.
So I don't know why it couldn't be a headwind for 20 years, especially when you look at demographics.
Well, okay, that's exactly the next question I was going to ask you. So just this morning I was looking at a stat that said that the baby boomer generation is 90 trillion in assets. There's 90 trillion in net worth. Right? But the baby boomer generation also at this point in time is they're almost all retired. And so this was in context with the savings rate, right? So the personal savings rate's gone down and it's kind of plumbing pretty much like record lows at this point in time. And I shouldn't say record because it's kind of negative in the past, but kind of on an average like this. And the conventional reaction to that is, oh, this is really bad. Savings rate, personal savings rate's really low and it's continuing to go down. that must mean a lot of financial household distress. Well, not necessarily, because as these boomers retire, well, they're not earning anymore, so they're not saving, right? And now they're sitting on 90 trillion in net worth. They're going to be spending a lot, and that's actually going to be a stimulant to the economy. And
Depends on how much they have to spend. And see, that's the problem with the passive bid. Because if the passive bid is no longer there, what's the bid?
right.
So
So
this is
here's my point, which is, and we can talk about the distribution of that 90 trillion, which is not even, right? It's just a few very rich households. The median boomer doesn't have all that much. I think like less than $250,000 in retirement savings. But they're not working anymore, so they're not putting money into the market anymore, right? So that their contribution to the bid, the passive bid, is now ending, and they're going to be spending, right? So they're going to be selling assets to do that. So that should be a very big demographic decelerant to the passive bid. It should be really increasingly weighing on it just from a demographic standpoint, no matter what happens in the economy. So, and I've talked to Mike about this, and he agrees. He said, I don't know exactly when we're going to get across the tipping point, but in his mind, I think the last time I talked to him, he's like, I don't think we're super far away from it at this point.
Yeah, and that's the point that I was trying to make. That if you have, let's just assume for a moment, S&P 500 is where it is due to net inflows, due to passive. Right? To your point, if the demographic shift turns those passive inflows into passive outflows, then my point is that 90 trillion on the balance sheet, that ain't 90 trillion anymore.
It's not a huge budget,
because that's 90 trillion on paper.
Yeah.
Those are unrealized gains. So if you have a stock that's trading at $100 a share, and there's no bid until you get to 50, take it to an extreme, right? Yep. Because all the actual discretionary money won't touch it at 90. They won't touch it at 80. They won't touch it at SpaceX or something. They'll start buying at 50. So now all of a sudden your 90 trillion in purchasing power goes down to 45 trillion. And then if you don't think they're going to rush to sell, I mean, if you're a baby boomer, you're 85 years old or whatever it is, and you just lost half your life savings.
Oh yeah, you see your nest egg vaporizing? Yeah, sell more. Get me out of the grass, yeah.
That's right, absolutely. And that
it's sort of interrupt, just to add to this so you can react to it. So let's assume that scenario happens, right? The passive flows go negative. We start having big corrections here. What's the rest of the world going to do, right? So you take Japan, right? They're already in not a great position right now, right? But they've got a ton of U.S.-based assets, right? They're going to sell those too. So you're going to have two really big selling mechanisms there. Just the U.S.-based giant mindless robot going in a different direction, but then you're going to have the rest of the world saying, well, I got to get my stuff out of there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you talked about the demographics of the baby boomers, but Japan could be in the same boat as the baby boomer.
Sure. I mean,
they need that money for more important purposes, like we were talking about earlier, and therefore they've got to sell. And like I said, I think that's one of the main reasons why gold went down. I don't know if it's at a bottom now, or who knows. We can talk about that, but yeah, I mean, the S&P 500. Obviously, there's a lot of foreigners, a lot of huge pension funds that own the AI, the Mag 7 or whatever they're calling it, and they could need those dollars a hell of a lot more than they need those shares in the Mag 7, and that could just exacerbate what you're talking about domestically with these baby boomers retiring and then needing those dollars more than they need those shares of the Mag 7. I wouldn't be worried about treasuries. Maybe the short term, it impacts the rate here and there. But at the end of the day, like we talked about in other videos, is that's really going to be predicated upon growth and inflation expectations. And it's not deficits, unfortunately. It's not although it's counterintuitive, it's really about growth and inflation. And so I don't know that growth and inflation would be directly impacted by what we're talking about. If anything, you get a bid for treasuries.
I totally agree with that. Also, too, you've got some other big parties that would be trying to put a bid under treasuries as well if they needed to.
The banks would, because they're just pocketing the spread. And if there's a big spread between what the 10 years paying and what, let's just say, nominal GDP in the United States, they're going to take that all day long.
So I just did an interview the other day with Louis Gauve, who I'm sure you know, big international investor.
Yeah.
He's a great guy to get kind of an ex-US perspective from. And he's quite concerned about this potential for kind of the rest of the world to start sucking its capital out of the US. And there's already some recent precedent where countries are providing incentive to their populace to do this. So I think in South Korea, he was saying, they have made it such that you can bring your assets back into the country and charge capital gains. So it's capital gains free. So if you sell your U.S. assets and bring the capital home, you're paying capital gains, right? So not only might this just happen for the reasons I talked about, but it might actually happen. You know, there might be a lot of carrots to do that from the government that's trying to get, you know, capital back into your works.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Are they saying that you can sell your whatever that SPY and you can bring those dollars back into the country, and then you won't be charged capital gains?
I believe so.
Yeah. So you know why they're doing that? Because they need the dollars.
They need the dollars. Yeah, like you said, exactly.
And I'm not talking about the people selling.
No,
I'm talking about the government.
The country needs the dollars. No, I get it, right? But I mean, again, it turns up the suction on that vacuum. Yeah, absolutely. It's again the way that you reverse this, assuming this is a trend or a slow-moving death spiral with the dollar going up, is you've got to have the global economy really start to pick up, and you would have, instead of deglobalization, you would have to get back to globalization, and you know, all of these kind of policies that we have, like protectionist type of policies, although they may be good for the individual country, they're not good for trade. They're not good for circulation of money and credit, which exacerbates the problem that we're talking about. Right. I personally, I don't see the odds of everybody trusting each other, even more against it. I don't see trust increasing amongst players here to go back to some sort of more globalized model.
No, neither do I. I think it's fourth turning. You're in the fourth turning, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And if it gets worse, then that likely means the dollar goes up and starts destroying and being more of a problem for all these other currencies, which I think, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in the next 6 months. But in the next 5 years, I think I'd be pretty surprised if we didn't see something that resembled Closet Accord 2.0, or, at the very least, swap lines. The problem with swap lines is that's still debt. Right? You're getting the dollars, but you have to pay them back.
You have to pay them back with interest.
Yeah, so I'd be surprised in the next 5 years if we didn't get a Closet Accord 2.0.
All right, well, George, look, it's been fantastic. We're coming up in the hour here. There's one last topic I want to try to squeeze in.
Yeah.
And I apologize for not giving you enough time to really flesh it out. But we were talking about this before we turned the camera on. It's related to this whole international money flow dynamic we're talking about. There's a lot of similarities between what's happening right now with strategy, right? Michael Saylor's company and Bitcoin, where I'll let you flush it out, but basically strategy is coming under more and more pressure as the price of Bitcoin goes down, and part of that is because the company's liability, just like these foreign countries, the company's liabilities are in dollars. So even though it loves Bitcoins, it's got to actually service the dividends that are those in dollars. And right now, Bitcoin is going down versus the dollar.
Yeah, they're a perfect example of what we've been talking about this whole video, or almost this whole video, with whether you like it or not. If you're in Japan, you have to have dollars to get that oil, or you have to have dollars to service your dollar-denominated debt. And you can hate the dollar, you can hate Trump, you can hate the United States, but that doesn't change the reality. And, the poster child for hating the dollar is MicroStrategy. The dollar's going to crash out there buying Bitcoin, the future of money, the future of currency, hodl.
So you're kidding.
Yeah, that's right. Mortgage your house, do all these things. But we saw today, just as we speak, the strategy is coming out and saying they're going to have to start selling Bitcoin, and not just 32. They're going to have to start selling probably billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. Why? Because they have to have dollars, because their liabilities are denominated in dollars. They're basically in the exact same position as Japan, or they're in the exact same position as India or South Korea. And it's just, I think, an ironic.
The problem is they don't make Toyotas to sell.
Yeah, that's right. And another thing that I was thinking, now this is a total hypothesis, Adam. And so I don't have any proof of any of this, but I do wonder if a lot of these private credit guys don't have stretch on their balance sheet. And I understand that, they're private credit and therefore, they shouldn't be buying preferreds, but it's a black box. And would you trust these guys? Like, seriously, I would ask your audience right now, would you trust these private credit guys? Would you trust Larry Fink that every single component of his black box is actually credit and it wasn't stretched preferreds? Because if you go back 6 months, right, when they're having all of these redemption requests, and you look at your balance sheet that you're trying to hide, and you're like, these guys aren't paying me, these guys aren't paying me, these guys aren't paying me, I've got no money coming in because this whole thing's like a sinking ship, but I have to pay out 5% every single quarter, whatever it is. At the time, if Stretch is paying, or is it 100 cents in the dollar, which it was for a long, long time, and if you have a guarantee from Sailor that he's going to keep it at 100 cents in the dollar, 11% dividend solves a lot of your problems.
Right.
A lot of your problems. And especially if you use a little leverage to boost out to maybe 20%.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of a conspiracy theory I have. But, now that Stretch is trading, I think today it got up to 80 or 85, but you're still at a 15% discount to par. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 6 months if you see a lot of these private credit funds that really have even more problems or at least pension funds, because of their exposure to Stretch, assuming that Stretch stays below par.
Got it. Yeah, and just for folks listening that don't know exactly what Stretch is basically a preferred security that Strategy, Michael Saylor's firm, has issued, and it pays this really big, fat, tasty dividend. And of course, a lot of people have said, how are they going to be able to do that sustainably? Well, as long as the price of Bitcoin rises, they'll be fine. But obviously, the price of Bitcoin has not been rising, and it's getting to the point where it's trading below par now. There's a lot of concern about its ongoing viability.
Yeah, and if that was your...
Right now, get up to 15% off select storage solutions.
You got big problems in that black box.
You glitched right there, George. Make that point again.
I said, and if that's your Hail Mary, if your Hail Mary from one of these private credit funds is Stretch, and your Hail Mary is trading at 80 cents in the dollar, if you're Larry Fink, you got a lot of problems.
You got a lot of problems, yeah. That's like the pilot who's like, the plane's starting to go down. He's like, well, at least I got a parachute. And then you open it up and there's like an anvil in there.
yeah, like the cartoons. Yeah, that could be what we see in the next 6 months.
All right. Well, George, look, this has just been, as expected, great, wide-ranging, but really fascinating and really enjoyable conversations. So obviously, thanks so much for coming on and doing this. For folks who would like to follow you and your work, where should they go?
Just go to YouTube and just type in George Gammon. That's my whiteboard videos. Or you just type in Rebel Capitalist, and those are the daily videos I do, often daily, where I talk about the exact same things that we've been discussing on.
Hey, Mr. Random Live Watcher. You gonna go run an ultra this morning? Yeah, I keep getting errors that YouTube's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth, so it's probably like glitching out and coming back. Is that what you're talking about? Is it like constant the whole time or just while you were on it? Interesting. Well, whatever, I'm still gonna let it run. I don't want to spend $500 yet on a satellite, and well, I do. I just don't want to spend it yet. Yeah, yeah. You know, I mean, if it maintains the connections, you know, that's really the only key, is that it just maintains the live connection the whole entire trip. If it does, then I know a satellite would probably be good, and I'll still probably run a backup connection on the cell phone. See, like now it's back to excellent, and then I can see you, doesn't view or anything unless you close it with somebody else now. Yeah. That's the nature of it. I think it's time to stop and get some gas and eat my breakfast out of the fridge. Trip. We'll just do pilots. I'm gonna have to go across the freeway to the other side. Yeah, I like that idea. Petroleum over there. I like that too. Except there's no bathroom there. Yeah. I'm good for now. the hell, dude? Freeway, put your fucking foot in it. Raindrops. Sprinkles. Sugar tip moonshine. Sounds like a good place to go. Manufacturing facility. I've been inside there. Pretty cool. Wasn't allowed to take pictures. this crap. Well, this blows. Should I watch TikTok or put a podcast back on? Or maybe I'll make another phone call. Stupid traffic. There's an accident somewhere up here. Google Maps just told me. Somewhere right here. Might not be able to see it with all the trucks. There's the flashing lights. Box truck's in the way, I can't see it. Couldn't see it from the mirror either. That wasn't too bad. Slowed me down a little bit. Of course, now that I already stopped for gas, should have stopped at the gas station and hit the head. I'll find a rest stop.
Pace recorded ahead.
Speaking of shiny heads,
Yeah.
Tim, have you ever been to South Korea?
Yes, I have.
Okay, would you like to go back?
Would, yeah.
Well, South Korean president calls for hair loss treatment to be covered by insurance, suggesting that government-funded lux maxing may increase the birth rate. This interesting proposal characterizes hair loss as, quote, a matter of survival. How do you feel about that, Tim?
I think that is not the right solution to the problem. They have tried a lot in South Korea, so I have spent time there. I would love to go back. It
Topic that is often very distressful to people living with it.
There you go.
How do you feel?
I am not distressed because I shaved my head starting with wrestling at like age 12, so I got used to it, thankfully.
Oh, you opted in?
As soon as I saw the option to white knuckle or shave my head, I decided to shave my head. But I think the stickier part here is actually some systemic issues related to things like rent in South Korea, because they tried a stimulus of something like $2 billion to encourage procreation. Didn't work. And when you look at some of the issues in South Korea that are not obvious originally, because people point to idiocracy like comps where they're like, well, everybody's waiting later, they're getting more educated, da, da, da. But in South Korea, for instance, if you want to build a family, meaning you're going to need a larger apartment, there are very straightforward things that are a problem, like your safety deposit or security deposit for the apartment is like 12 months rent. And people can't afford it. So they're like, I can't afford it. I can't afford it.
That's so much, so many months rent.
It is. And they're like, I can't afford it, therefore I can't have kids.
Who can afford a year of rent if they're renting?
Yeah. And I may be getting the months slightly wrong, but I talked to some Koreans and they're like, no, it's like, I want to have a kid, and here are the reasons I can't. So I don't think fixing hair loss is going to actually solve that type of problem.
Look, Tim, we're playing in the margins here because we can't get into the housing problem. Okay, and the margins happen to be the top of the head. That's what matters most. The most interesting explanation I've heard for South Korea is K-pop. In order to become a K-pop star, you have to sign your agreement. Your artist's agreement says that you're not going to be in a relationship while you're doing it. So they have created the most popular cultural export and import, I guess, or internal stars have no families, no kids. Think about what happens when you do that. Like, it's just, so inversion, easy as fuck. The only way you can become a K-pop star is if you've already got kids. That's my solution. Anyway, that's
because also these become like role models, and now these role models have no kids.
Those kids don't need rooms. They're talking.
Yeah, they can go on the road on the tour bus, right? Well, there was that guy in Georgia, so to try and fix
the country or the state.
The country of Georgia, in an attempt to try and improve the birth rate there. It's very religious, very Roman Catholic, and there's a rock star preacher guy, and he said, I will personally baptize the third child of any family in the country. All of these families speed ran children to get to the third, and it's had a meaningful increase in the birth rate because these families wanted this guy that was basically the most popular person in the entire country to like do the thing on the kid.
Or you could just do what certain billionaires like the CEO of Telegram has done and say, I will pay for IVF for as many women who would like to have
sperm donoring his way to
100 plus.
He's a 2026 Genghis Khan.
Yeah, he's doing it the nicer way.
It's weird that most people don't do that, you know? So programmed to it's like we're programmed for the instrumental part of it, like the sex, but like not actually the actual like, evolutionary goal is not part of the programming.
Right.
And if it were, it would be insane. You'd have every rich person be sperm donating. So crazy. It would be like all these scandals. It would be people with thousands of kids. It's
more ideas guys than operations guys, I guess. You know, one of the have you seen the documentary of the guy who had 1,000 children? So he started off as a sperm donor.
The doctor or no?
And no, it's not a doctor.
It's just one of those two.
If you could search it, Jared, it's this big, thick, like
Dutch-looking guy, and he started off local sperm donate, but I think in the Netherlands the limit's 20, and he just started going to different jurisdictions, like playing around with it in the Netherlands.
Was it not a guy that switched out from his own?
There was a doctor.
It was a doctor.
There was a documentary.
So we've got
doing that.
two guys.
Harold Shipman of.
We've got two guys trying to achieve the same thing, but very different routes in.
Correct. Correct. And this guy, because there's a limit in the Netherlands of, I think, of 20 children that you're allowed to do it, because they're then concerned of inbreeding that may happen. And this guy ranked it all the way up to 1,000. And then when he got banned from the Netherlands, he started going, I believe, to Kenya, just to.
You're really going to stand out in Kenya if you're a guy from the Netherlands, aren't you? Yeah. Like when the kids come out, you're really going to know that that's not somebody
Yes.
from Kenya.
Yeah. There's a Mr. Beast of everything. Guy's gonna win, you know.
But like when you have a guy like that, you really want him to have a really good DNA, on demand, high IQ, good disposition.
You want Formula One drivers to be doing this. We need Max Verstappen to be like lighting as a spur.
You're having a meaningful effect on like the whole human gene pool when you do that. Like especially like 3 or 4 generations later, when there's 100,000 descendants in the world and they're procreating.
Well, what does the future look like if it's the progeny of billionaires plus the hyper religious, right? Like, what does that mix look like? I mean, you look at certain countries and birth rates by kind of subpopulation, say, in certain places in the Middle East and stuff, and it's very much the hyper religious, right? So, what does that mean in 20 years' time? Yeah, I don't know.
It's also the really impoverished people who were in an environment where a lot of kids used to die in childbirth, but now they don't anymore. But the adjustment of fertility takes a lag generation, so you have this huge balloon usually. Yeah. So that's also.
Tim Urban, I want to know what's on your mind, man. What have you been obsessed with? I mean, we'll get to pianos, I'm sure, but maybe that's for later after a few toothpicks.
I'm very, when I'm writing a book, I'm just like in it and immersed in it. So I've been working on a book for 3 years. It's the story of everything. It goes from the Big Bang to the end of the verse.
You know, I've always wanted to say I think you should be just a little more ambitious. Reach for the brass ring.
You know, it's like secretly kind of not as hard as it seems, because you don't have to go that in depth on anything. So it's little dips. It's like kind of like 100 blog posts in one.
You're like World War II. That was a bummer, but it worked out.
No. So for example,
one sentence.
No, literally. Like so.
Sorry, Japan. We'll make it up to you.
I was like, what do? I have the World Wars. I can't not mention them, but like, there's certain things I want to focus on, things that people are like, I never knew that. I'm like, that's so mind blowing. Like, we're not gonna go deep enough. Everyone knows the basics of World Wars, right? So I decided instead I'm gonna make it like a 2-page story that's going to be an allegory, which is a brawl at Denny's. Because I got hooked on YouTube brawls at Denny's at certain. Okay. So then I came to my mind. I was like hooked on one that week when I was writing this, and I was like, okay, so you've got like, you've got a bunch of tension in the room, and then finally, like, Austria-Hungary goes over and just like slaps Serbia guy in the face, and then a bunch of then you have Russia and France kind of like these big guys who are friends with the Serbian guy. So I just did this and I don't know. A lot of times I'm like, I don't know if that's good. I don't know if people will like this. That's what I just did. I guess that's how we're doing the World Wars. Then I move on because I have to move on.
Allegory of Denny's.
Yeah, because everything I have to think about, how do I get this in there in a way that's still fun and new and different? I don't want you to feel like you're reading a textbook or an encyclopedia.
I would love 1-sentence historical event recaps. I think that would be a fucking wonderful.
Just like a fortune cookie history.
Yeah, because Barstool Sports State Fortnite does the One Bite Pizza review, and this is just the historical equivalent.
It's like the Elton John diary entry. I think it's bought a.
No. You told me about this. It's a single grade. That or the Huntress Thompson one, which like tracked, but I guess that wasn't a diary entry that tracked what his daily routine was. I woke up at 12 midday, 2 cigarettes, cocaine, whiskey, MDMA, but yeah.
Oh, here it is. Got up, tidied the house, bought a Rolls Royce, had dinner, wrote Candle in the Wind, had dinner with Ringo Starr. That was one day.
Bought a Rolls Royce, wrote Candle in the Wind, had dinner with Ringo.
I wonder if tidying the house was meaningful to him. Was that like soothing therapy, or was that just buying time before he could justify walking to the Rolls Royce
dealership opened? Yeah.
There's also 2 dinners in there.
I think one of those is a dinner. I think the middle dinner doesn't exist.
We also use lunch and dinner. We use lunch and dinner interchangeably in the UK.
It's
and then
very
dinner is supper or something, right?
You can throw that. You can throw tea in the mix as well.
Okay.
Okay,
So
tea's
also
good.
two ones.
Afters is also not bad.
Yeah.
Afters is dessert.
Completely gets mixed up.
I had to, so I also had to get, so speaking of one sentence, I had to get from, because I'm going, I did like ancient Mesopotamia pretty thoroughly, because that's so like important, and like, the first empire, which was the Akkadians, and you have Sargon the Great, the first emperor, and I did all that. And then I'm like, now I want to get to like the Bronze Age collapse and that stuff, but there's 1,000 years in between, so I decided, again, I'm like, what do I do? So I just wrote so I'm going to do this in one sentence, and it ended up being a paragraph, pretty long. It will be a full page, but it's a one run-on sentence that goes through 2200 BC to 1200 BC. So you got,
It's a really speed runner.
well, but not usually. Sometimes then I would slow down and spend 20 pages on the Bronze Age collapse or whatever. But yeah, I think
You
one
speed run
sentence.
Rome. You did Rome in a single sentence.
No, Rome is later.
Separate drink. Okay.
Yeah. Rome I had to say a little bit more about, but you're not going to go through the whole.
How did you choose this book project?
Because I write blog posts about anything, and it's a great format.
Now, just so people understand what I'm talking about, because I have more context than some people listening. How long are some of your blog posts?
So the short ones are like 3,000 words, which is like, I don't know, 10 minute reads. Yeah, something like that. And then early on, I was like, I can't go over 2,000 words. I was like, okay, I can't go over 3,000, 4,000, and then it just kept going up. And then I did one that was like 8,000, but like it got some traffic, and I was like, well, I did okay. And then the next one, and then so I just had a problem where it was like one of these, it's like someone who keeps taking more drugs to get the same high. Like, so I would just start like getting more thorough and more thorough. By the end, I was writing 40,000 words.
That's
word count.
That's a book for
yeah,
it's like 50,000 words.
It's like 120, 150 pages or something like that. But so I had this format where I could write any length blog post. So I'm like, why would I do a book? I have a, and then I was like, okay, if I'm doing a book, it has to be a topic that I could never do as a blog post. Like, what's the ultimate topic that like is so big it has to be
history of everything?
So the answer was everything as a topic.
Now I'm just going to pat your back a little bit because I know you're not going to do it yourself. One of your longer posts, is it fair to say, I hesitate to even call it a post, but man of the hour, right? SpaceX is on a lot of minds. I checked today, it's like 2.5 trillion market cap right now. So Elon liked your stuff so much that he gave you exclusive access to what?
Yeah, so he read my AI post and was like, hey, I like how this guy
was
writes.
circa when?
This is 2015, the beginning of 2015.
2015.
So this is really early days with AI and with Elon. Really. I mean, he was a huge deal, but a lot of people I told in my life, they didn't know who he was at that time. Yeah. And SpaceX some people knew about it, some people didn't. And basically he said, how he is. He's very like, he likes to trust people and be hands off in a lot of those cases. So he said, would you like to write about Tesla or SpaceX ever? Normally, if someone's like, you want to write about my company, I would say no. But like Tesla and SpaceX are as fascinating as any blog post could be because they're about such bigger things than a company, right?
Also with the access. Yeah.
So then he basically said, you can talk to me as much as you want, and also any engineer you want, and they don't have to be media ready. And I said, because I said to him, like, on my side, I was like, I'm not like a journalist who's like, you can't change anything. I'm like, I'll send you the post at the end, and if there's something like some proprietary thing someone said that's not supposed to be in there, you can take it out. And they really almost took nothing out. It was like the cost of like a Starlink set. Starlink was an idea at that time. It was like little things like that, the bandwidth of a Starlink satellite, things like random numbers. There were like 2 or 3 of those. You can't put that in. Elon had like criticized someone that later they were like, nah, we don't want that in there. I was like, okay, I'll take that out. Other than that, like they let it go, and it was obviously I'm like a space architect in SpaceX, factory in Hawthorne, and just looking at the rocket up close, I got to like sit in a Dragon and like talk to
this is 2015.
2015. So they had never landed a rocket yet. That was the big thing at the time. No one has ever landed a rocket. SpaceX is trying to. People think they're crazy. And I did one of these because they started broadcasting their launches, and I did the very, it was like one of the very first ones. They were like, do you want to do one where we're trying to land a rocket? I was like, sure. So I was like a guest broadcaster on the time when they landed for the first time. So like the 7-year-old in me was like, I can't believe this is real. It was like it was very exciting. And then later I wrote a big post about Neuralink, which they launched the company alongside that post. So it was like, and then the scariest thing ever was the whole company now is kind of waiting on me
and I'm a procrastinator.
Oh, with Neuralink.
Yeah, and like we're talking about how my posts always go longer. They thought it was gonna be like a 6,000 word post. This one was 40, and Elon, by the way, I think this chill. He was like, "It's so long, bro," and I was like, "This is how I am, dude. This is how I don't know how to tell you this. I can't not do it. There's so many. I can't talk about Neuralink without talking about other brain-computer interface. I can't talk about those.
Then I have to talk about evolution, and then I have to talk about the brain.
The nervous system. How did that evolve in the first place? We end up back in like the most ancient part of like the origin of life. But that's how I do it. And it was such a complicated story to tell because it was the concept of a brain-computer interface, but then the reason for it, which was like working with AI. What the hell? So it was long, but he sends out a tweet that was like we'll be launching in a week. Wait, but why post will be ready in a week. And I was like, no, it won't. So scary. So I ended up like furiously trying to finish it. I finished in 3 weeks, and I was like, talk about like good external pressure. It's helpful to have like Elon Musk publicly putting pressure on you. So that was that. But yeah, and it's just great because you get to like by writing that post, you end up just fully understanding like a whole industry you didn't understand before, right? So it was fun.
So yeah, they're blog posts, and then they're blog posts.
Right, but yeah, so that's why a book had to be something even bigger than something like that.
You've got the most watched TED Talk of all time.
Second.
Oh, who beat you?
Ken Robinson. Well, he was the first one posted, like back in 2006. Mine was 2016, so he's got a decade on me. But I'm like, I think he has like 80 million, or I thought 78. Come on, man! Like, just get to first.
Put some paid behind it. Just put some paid advertising behind it.
I don't think that'll. I think it's all YouTube.
You could make it back with that.
Yeah.
Got one of those watch phones.
Yeah,
Just lots of people just learning how to not procrastinate.
Maybe for your Kindle version of your book, or all your books, you just have, it's almost like signing up for Wi-Fi at the airport. Like you have to watch an ad, but in this case, they have to watch your TED Talk.
30 seconds. Just enough to trigger a play. That's all I need.
With the new book, let's say history's kind of like the stock market and everything's priced. I feel like World War II is very much it's like Apple right now, right? Like people talk about World War II. What parts of history from your research do you think is like way more fascinating than people give it credit?
Oh my God, so many. Almost everything. I mean, everything once you dig in. So, I mean, I was just writing about the black hole era. You know what that is? Like, I'm gonna get like, I might like have an existential crisis if I talk about this. But so basically, there's the star era goes on for like 100 trillion years or something. So that the last stars will be born around 100 trillion years from now, and 20 trillion years later, the last stars are gone, and we're in the degenerate era, and there's just nothing except for little white dwarfs, and then that ends, and all that's left is black holes. And so how long is the black hole era? Because the black holes decay really slowly, but then some of them are going to be huge. But there'll be a point at some point when the last black hole,
it's Hawking radiation, right?
Hawking radiation, exactly. It's like the tiniest little, right around the edge, antimatter, you know. So I was like, how do I explain how long? It's 10 to the 106 years. Okay, so what does that mean? How do you put that in context? And the way I thought about it is, okay, imagine if we make a timeline where every centimeter is a billion. So far, this is how long we've gone. Big Bang today, right? It's 13 centimeters. And now I was like, so how long would this timeline have to be to get all the way to the end of the black hole era? And I said, okay, well, let's just actually get. I always want to like actually do the calculation. So I was like, let's imagine this is a ribbon with a 0.5 millimeter thickness, and it's 1 centimeter wide, and then every centimeter of it is of length is a billion years. So how long would it have to be? Turns out you'd have to, if you could pack, like, okay, if you imagine you packed this room tightly with ribbon, so it's just like this block, hard rock of ribbon, just packed as much as you possibly could in, you know, and every centimeter is a billion years. Okay, would that be enough time? No, you'd have to pack the entire observable universe to the brim with ribbon, and that would get you nowhere close. You'd have to pack it. The final number I came to is 1.4 billion observable universes with this ribbon to have by the end of the last universe to get to the end of the ribbon. That's the end of the black hole era. So there's shit like that I'm going to put a wrinkle into it, because after that you still have quantum fluctuations. Oh yeah. Oh no, the dark era. That goes on for even longer. So the five stages of the 5 ages of the universe, book from 1996 goes through this. They had to come up with their own numbering convention to be able to name it. They didn't use ribbon. Yours is much more inventive. Ours was way more known. The dark era, which just comes after the observable universe, after the black hole era, is way more upsetting, because now imagine you have you wrote a book that contains the history of the universe, right? And every page is an equal amount of time. You could pack, and it's like something like 16 of these, so a trillion times a trillion times a trillion times a trillion observable universes, but 16 trillions, to the brim with pages. And from the Big Bang to the end of the black hole era, that whole thing with the ribbon I just talked about is not even the first proton in the first atom of the first letter of the first word of the first page of the first book. So I get upset about this. This is the kind of thing that when I think about it, then I'm like in bed and I literally can't sleep and I'm tossing and turning. And the next day my wife is like, why are you so tired? And I'm like, it's too like embarrassing to explain, but like
I'm having an existential crisis about how long the universe is going to last.
Here, but that amount of time will pass. And that is weird. Like, no one should want eternal life.
There's an interesting theory about super advanced alien civilizations shutting down because toward the end of that era, you end up with an unbelievably cold universe, one that's significantly colder than ours now. Now, it's not much, but on the margins, this makes a big difference because almost all energy usage blows off heat. And if you were doing simulations, ancestor simulations, future simulations, if you'd gone into the metaverse and decided to make this your new place, it's way more efficient to do this the later that we go. So I'm going to guess that you came across this too.
It's one of the explanations for the Fermi paradox, which is the paradox that asks why have we not seen aliens when there should be lots of them out there. We should see something. That there should be some that are far more advanced than us, so they should really be noticeable out there building Dyson spheres and stuff. And there's many explanations. One of them is they're all hibernating because they've all figured this out and they're going on this thing that will feel like a second to them, but they're just going to go past a few, I don't know, whatever it is, a few hundred million years. And we're just in this era where it doesn't make sense for an advanced species to be conscious, so they just are all hibernating.
It's like waiting for the ventilation guy to come and fit the AC before installing a new computer. That's why. It's like, it's going to wait, it's too hard, it's going to make the apartment too hot. Let's go play pickleball for a while, he'll come in a bit, and then once it's
tell us hibernating, it should be like a blink, okay, we're here, now let's keep going. Yeah. But to us, we're just like, it's empty, no one's here.
Yeah. Fuck boy. It's really cool, dude. I got obsessed with that Super Voids. The way to Super Void. Now that, if you want an existential
another crisis.
Yeah. It's like so you should have a relatively uniform universe, right? A cosmic microwave background, but you don't. You have little fluctuations. This, even within little fluctuations, it should still broadly be pretty uniform. But it's not. There's these huge things called super voids that are like millions of light years.
Some of them are, the biggest ones are 1 billion light years across.
Boetta's one might be 1 billion light years, a few billion light years across, and it's almost entirely bereft of material for billions of light years. It's insane. It's so fucking.
There are some theories that even we are in somewhat of a void potentially, like that we're in a very uncrowded part of the observable universe, perhaps. It's unclear, but and of course, by the way, this everything we're talking about, the voids we see, everything that's all within the observable universe, which might be like a grain of sand compared to the Earth size of the full universe. Like this is just what we can see, and like that's also freaks me out.
Before we continue, most people in their 30s are still training up.
All right, where?
it.